Tonight, we're unraveling the mysteries of the Lone Star State, where every road, bridge, and forgotten town carries a legend darker than the night itself. From phantom hitchhikers to cursed highways, get ready for 20 of the creepiest Texas horror stories that no one can explain. But before we begin, here's a chilling fact. Most viewers make one mistake. They leave without subscribing. And when they do, they miss out on the most terrifying stories that only the boldest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the shadows is far from over. So tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments, because here, the night never ends and the horror is only getting started. Now, let's step into the darkness. It was late September of 2019, a few weeks after my divorce had finalized, when I first drove that stretch of Highway 281 at night. If you're not from Texas, you probably don't know the kind of quiet I'm talking about. Out near Johnson City, once you leave the glow of Austin behind, the road falls into this deep, hollow darkness. There are no streetlights, no neon signs buzzing overhead, just miles of blacktop lined with cedar trees and brush. Even the stars feel distant out there, dim behind a haze of heat rising off the asphalt long after sundown. I was headed back from San Antonio to Marble Falls after a late dinner with an old friend, trying to clear my head before another week of dragging myself through work. It must have been around 11:30 at night when I saw her. At first, she looked like nothing more than a pale blur at the edge of my headlights. I thought it was a deer about to dart across the road, so I tapped the brakes and gripped the wheel tighter. But then the figure stepped forward. It wasn't an animal, it was a woman. She was standing just off the shoulder, one hand raised as if flagging me down. I remember the strange stiffness in her posture, like every movement took effort. She wore what looked like a light-colored dress that hung past her knees, though the night made the details hard to pin down. Her hair was dark and stringy, plastered against her face and shoulders as if it had just rained, but the sky was clear. I slowed almost to a stop, heart thudding in my throat. Out there that late, it could have been anything. Someone injured, stranded, needing help. 100 thoughts collided in my head. A car accident I hadn't seen, a domestic situation gone bad, maybe even a setup for a robbery. But what got me was her face. As my headlights passed over her, I could see she wasn't looking at me directly. Her eyes were fixed just slightly to the left, as if staring at something I couldn't see. Her mouth hung open, and her lips moved, faintly, forming words that didn't carry over the hum of my engine. I pulled onto the shoulder a few yards ahead and rolled down the passenger side window. The night air rushed in, warm and dry with the faint smell of cedar. "Are you okay, ma'am?" I called out. No answer. She stood rooted in place, hand still raised. Something in me resisted the idea of stepping out of the truck, but my better instincts told me I couldn't just leave her there. I threw the gear shift into park, grabbed my phone, and was just about to open the door when I felt it. The air in the cab dropped, as if someone had just opened a walk-in freezer. My skin prickled, goosebumps racing across my arms despite the Texas heat. I glanced to my right. The passenger seat was no longer empty. It's hard to describe what I saw without sounding like I've lost my mind, but I swear to you there was a shape sitting there. Not solid, not flesh, just a dense whiteness, a pale impression of a person. For half a second, I thought maybe the headlights had cast her reflection through the glass, but it wasn't light. It was in the seat. I could feel it pressing against the space beside me. I shot back against the driver's side door so hard my shoulder cracked against the window. The thing was gone just as quick, leaving nothing but that awful cold. I fumbled the gear shift, slammed my foot on the gas, and didn't stop until I was halfway to Marble Falls. The whole time, the right side of the truck felt heavy, weighted, down like something invisible sat there watching me drive. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the cab had warmed up again. The weight lifted. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head, asking myself if I'd imagined it. Stress does weird things to people. Divorce, lack of sleep, too much whiskey in San Antonio. That's what I told myself. But the memory wouldn't fade. The second time it happened. 2 weeks later, I wasn't alone. I had my buddy Chris riding with me. We'd gone down to San Antonio again, grabbed a few drinks, and were heading back north well after midnight. He'd taken the passenger seat, talking my ear off about his new job. Somewhere near the Blanco County line, he stopped mid-sentence. I remember because his tone had been light and loud, then suddenly clipped off like a radio being switched off. I glanced over and saw his eyes fixed dead ahead. "What?" I asked. He nodded toward the shoulder up ahead. "You see her?" And there she was. Same pale figure, same raised hand, same damp, stringy hair. Chris leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "What the hell is she doing out here?" I didn't answer. I'd already gone cold. When we passed her, I fought every instinct to keep my eyes on the road, but I felt it happen. The temperature in the cab nosedived. My breath puffed white in the air. Chris swore under his breath, rubbed his arms. "Why is it so damn cold all of a sudden?" he muttered. I didn't look to my right. I couldn't. My hands clenched so tight around the steering wheel that my knuckles cracked. Chris turned his head, then froze. "Dude," he whispered. "There's somebody in the seat." I floored it, didn't say a word, didn't even blink, until we hit the glowing lights of Marble Falls. Only then did Chris speak again, voice tight and shaky. "I saw her, man. She was sitting right next to me. I swear to God she was. We never talked about it again. Not once." He moved to Dallas a few months later, and when I ran into him at a wedding last year, the first thing he asked me, before hello, before congratulations, was whether I'd driven 281 at night since. I told him no. It was a lie, because the third time, I was alone again. It was January of 2021, cold, windy, one of those nights where even the moon looks sharp enough to cut you. I'd stayed late at work, lost track of time, and ended up taking the long drive back well after midnight. I told myself I'd take a different route, but habit won out. Highway 281 stretched before me, black and endless. She appeared in the same spot. Only this time she was closer to the road, standing dead center in the lane with her hand raised high. I hit the brakes so hard my tires squealed. The truck fishtailed. And for a terrifying second I thought I'd hit her. But when the headlights swept over her figure, she didn't move. Didn't even flinch. I stopped less than 10 feet away. Her eyes were on me now. Wide, unblinking, the whites catching the glare of the headlights. Her lips moved again, faster this time, whispering something I still couldn't hear. Every nerve in my body screamed to throw it in reverse, spin around, anything to get away, but I was rooted in place, watching her lips. I don't know how long. I sat there, locked in that moment, and then, without warning, the cab filled with that freezing air. My breath fogged the windshield. The weight dropped onto the passenger seat. I turned my head. She was sitting there, fully, clearly, as if she had always belonged in that space. Her wet hair clung to her face, her pale dress clung to her thin frame, and her lips moved inches from my ear, whispering words I still couldn't understand. I slammed the truck into gear and tore down the highway, swerving like a drunk. My chest ached with terror. I didn't look back until I reached Johnson City, and by then the cab was warm again. The seat was empty. I haven't told anyone else about that night. Not my family, not my co-workers. I can't even write this without feeling the hairs on my neck standing on end. I don't drive 281 after dark anymore. I take the long way, even if it adds an hour. But last week, on my way back from Fredericksburg, I saw something that froze my blood in daylight. On the shoulder of 281, near that same stretch of road, there's a simple wooden cross hammered into the dirt. Fresh flowers lay at its base, still bright and colorful, as if someone had just left them. The name carved into the cross was worn, but I swear I could read the letters. It was a woman's name, and the date of death, carved beneath it, was September 2019. I was driving through West Texas in the summer of 2007 when I stumbled onto a place I swear to God shouldn't exist anymore. I was 26 back then, on my way to Arizona for a job interview, broke, tired, and barely holding my car together. My Honda Civic had been overheating for hours and I didn't dare push it too far. It was just past 9:30 at night when I pulled into Lubbock, tired enough that I could have slept in a gas station parking lot if it came to that. But there it was, a roadside motel with a glowing red sign flickering against the night sky. Red, Dirt Motel, it read in cracked neon letters. The place looked old, older than the chain motels lined up along the highway, but not abandoned. A single streetlight buzzed over the parking lot, casting that sickly orange glow that makes everything look more desperate than it is. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled in. My Civic hissed like it was relieved to finally stop. Didn't even think about it. I grabbed my backpack, walked inside, and rang the little service bell on the desk. The lobby smelled faintly of mildew and pine sol. Behind the counter, an old man shuffled out from a back room. He was tall and thin, with a faded western shirt buttoned all the way up to his neck. His eyes were cloudy but sharp in a way that made me uncomfortable. "Traveling through?" he asked, his voice low, raspy. "Yeah. Just need a room for the night." He slid a key across the counter. An actual metal key, not one of those plastic cards. The tag was painted red with a fading number 7 on it. $42. He said I paid in cash, mostly 1s and 5s, and he counted them like each bill mattered. No receipt, no computer, just a nod as he pushed the register drawer shut. "Room 7, around the corner." I thanked him and headed out, and that's when I noticed something strange. The air felt heavier in the parking lot, like I'd just stepped into a humid cellar. I told myself it was just the Texas night pressing down, but I'd been in that heat all day and it hadn't felt like this before. Room 7 was on the far end, right beneath a buzzing light fixture that seemed one flicker away from dying. The paint on the door was chipped, the handle loose. I let myself in. The room wasn't disgusting exactly, but it had that smell cheap motels get when the air conditioner's been working overtime to cover up mold. The carpet was red, stained darker in patches. The bedspread had a pattern of little brown diamonds, some of which had worn away. The air conditioner rattled so loudly I wondered if I'd even be able to sleep. But I was tired, so tired I didn't care. I set my backpack down and turned on the lamp. That's when I noticed the wallpaper. Faded, yellowing, curling at the corners. It wasn't just old. It was moving. Very faint, like the slow rise and fall of a person breathing under fabric. I froze. Watched it. Told myself it was the air from the AC rattling through the vents, but the AC wasn't pointed at the wall. The air was blowing the other way. Still, I wasn't about to start freaking myself out. I turned on the TV, a clunky old box set with a dozen channels of static and one half-working news station, and sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on. Around midnight, I finally lay down, but the noise of that AC mixed with something else. A low sound, rhythmic, almost like whispering carried through the pipes. I sat up, turned off the TV, and listened. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't the AC. It was coming from the walls. It reminded me of someone breathing right, up against your ear, slow and steady, but too loud, too wet. Like whoever it was had been breathing that way for a long, long time. I turned the lamp back on. The wallpaper bulged slightly above the headboard, pushing outward, then relaxing back in. I swear it did. Like lungs expanding. I grabbed my backpack and decided right then I was leaving. $42 lost was nothing compared to whatever was happening here. I yanked the door open. The hallway outside wasn't the same as it had been. I know how that sounds. But I had walked down that hallway not even an hour earlier, and it had been lined with 6 other doors, numbers 1 through 6, all faded red. Now, standing there, the hall stretched longer. The doors were gone, just the peeling wallpaper running. Into darkness, the air pressed down on me thick and hot. I could still hear the breathing, but now it wasn't just from the wall. It was everywhere, surrounding me. I stepped back into the room and slammed the door shut. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I told myself I'd wait until morning. Just ride it out. Plenty of motels feel creepy, right? Old pipes, thin walls, paranoia from being tired. But then came the knocking, not at the door, from inside the walls, sharp, slow knocks as though someone was trapped in there trying to get out. I pressed myself against the opposite wall and stared at the bulge in the wallpaper. With each knock, the wallpaper trembled. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Finally, I snapped. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and tore the door open. This time the hallway looked normal again. Doors, numbers, dim, buzzing light. I didn't care. I ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, the Civic coughing to life. I peeled out of that lot so fast gravel spit out behind me. I didn't look in the rearview mirror until I hit the highway. And here's the thing. There was nothing behind me. No sign, no red dirt motel. Just an empty stretch of road and the glow of the city in the distance. I told myself I'd dreamed it, hallucinated it from exhaustion. But 3 days later at a gas station outside Tucson, I overheard two truckers talking. One of them mentioned a motel near Lubbock, one that didn't exist anymore. Said it had been bulldozed back in the 90s. Said people used to check in and never check out. He called it the Red Dirt Motel. I didn't join their conversation. I didn't say a word, but I've never forgotten the sound of those walls breathing. And sometimes when I'm alone in bed, late at night with the AC rattling, I swear I can still hear it. I wasn't planning to write this, not here, not anywhere. The last thing I need is someone telling me I just got spooked by campfire stories, or worse, that I should go see a doctor. But I can't sleep anymore, not since last summer. Every time I close my eyes, I see that glow hanging in the air, silent, patient, watching. And I hear my friend's voice, thin and desperate, calling my name across the scrubland. This all happened in August of last year. I live in Texas, born and raised in Fort Stockton, but at the time I had been working part-time out near Alpine, bouncing between odd ranch jobs and shifts at a feed store. I've always liked the quiet out there, the long stretches of desert, the mountains sitting like shadows on the horizon, the dry smell of dust baking under the sun. It's lonely, but in a way that feels clean, like the world has been scrubbed of all the noise that clogs up cities. That summer was brutal. Daytime, temperatures would scrape triple digits, and even at night the air clung to you like a fever. On weekends, some of us would drive out past Marfa to drink, listen to music, and, if we felt like giving into local folklore, watch for the Marfa lights. If you've never heard of them, they're these strange orbs people claim to see, out in the desert, mostly near Route 67. They appear just above the ground or low in the sky, glowing white or red or yellow, moving in ways headlights and planes shouldn't. The official line is that it's mirages or car lights refracting, but locals tell different stories. Old ranchers say they've seen them split into two, merge, vanish, then reappear miles away. Some say the lights follow you if you wander too far. Others, more drunk than not, claim the lights are spirits, guardians, omens. I never put much stock in any of it. But then, I hadn't spent a night alone with them. Not until that August. It was Friday, August 12th, around 10:30 p.m. I remember because I had checked the dashboard clock while waiting for my buddy Travis. He was running late, as usual. We had planned to camp out near the viewing area, a tourist spot really, with a platform and benches where out-of-towners could park and wait to see the lights. But Travis wanted to take it further. Forget the platform, he told me earlier that day. We'll head out on foot into the real desert, where the cattle go missing. He grinned when he said it, like he wanted to scare me. When he finally pulled up, tossing a cooler into the back of my truck, I already had second thoughts, but I shrugged it off. We were both in our 20s, restless. The kind of restless that makes you chase things you don't even believe in. By 11:15, we were off the highway, bouncing down a dirt trail that curved between mesquite bushes and faded barbed wire fences. The stars were out in thick clusters, brighter than I'd seen all year, and the moon was just a sliver. The air smelled of dust and creosote. We parked by a shallow, dry creek bed and hauled our gear out. Travis brought 2 lawn chairs, a Bluetooth speaker, and a 6-pack of Shiner. I carried a flashlight, a bedroll, and my dad's old Remington rifle. Not because I thought we'd need it, but because rattlesnakes are real. unlike floating desert lights. We settled in, cracked a couple of beers, and for a while it was just quiet. Quiet in that heavy desert way, where every little sound stands out. The crunch of a cricket, the flap of a moth against the cooler lid, the whistle of wind dragging sand across metal fence wire. It must have been close to midnight when Travis nudged me. "There," he said, pointing east, past the low hills. I squinted. At first I thought it was a car headlight cresting the ridge, but the glow didn't move like that. It shimmered, faint and pale, maybe half a mile out, hovering just above the scrub. I felt a strange pull in my chest, like my breath had gone shallow without me realizing. We watched in silence as the glow brightened, split into two, then three. They drifted apart, gliding smoothly, then snapped together in an instant, fusing back into one. "Jesus," Travis muttered. "You seeing this too, right?" "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded flat, like it wasn't coming from me. We sat like that for minutes, 10, maybe 15, just staring. Then Travis, of course, had to push it further. He grabbed the flashlight, flicked it on, and shined it out toward the glow. The beam barely reached a few dozen yards, swallowed by the night. But when it cut across the desert, the light in the distance flickered, not like it went out. More like it blinked, and that's when I noticed something else. The air had gone still. No wind, no crickets, no rustle of brush. Just silence, so total it pressed against my ears. "Don't," I said, but Travis was already standing. "Come on, let's see how close we can get," I argued, but he was stubborn and I didn't want to look like a coward, so I followed. We left the cooler, the chairs, everything, and started across the desert. The ground was uneven, dotted with rocks and brittle tufts of grass. My boots crunched softly, each step echoing louder than it should. The glow didn't seem far, but distance in the desert is a trickster. You think something's a few hundred yards away and it ends up being miles. Still, the more we walked, the clearer it became that the light was aware of us. It shifted when we shifted, pausing when we paused. Once, when Travis waved, the glow brightened sharply, almost like it was answering. I remember my stomach turning cold then. I wanted to turn back, but Travis was grinning like a kid sneaking into a movie theater. We walked maybe 20 minutes before I realized we were deeper than I had ever been off the road. The truck lights were a faint glimmer behind us. Ahead, the glow swelled brighter, white with a reddish tinge, as if something alive was burning without smoke. Then it darted sideways. Not slowly, not drifting. Darted, like a flashlight beam being snapped in another direction. Travis froze. "Did you see?" He started but stopped, because the glow was no longer in front of us, it was to our left. Closer. "Enough," I whispered. My throat was dry. "We're heading back." But before we could turn, the glow shot forward, covering what had to be 100 yards in the blink of an eye, and stopped dead, maybe 50 yards away, floating, waiting. That was the moment I knew, down to my bones, that it wasn't just some trick of the air. I don't care what scientists or locals or anyone says. That thing was watching us. Travis whispered, "Holy shit." Then from somewhere past the glow came the sound of cattle lowing. Weak, panicked, cut off. We stood rooted, unable to move. The light dimmed, pulsed once, then split into two again. One drifted toward the sound. The other stayed locked on us. I can't tell you exactly what happened in the next few minutes. My memory feels fractured, like a dream where pieces vanish as soon as you try to grab them. I remember the smell of something metallic in the air, like blood or hot iron. I remember the sensation that the ground itself was humming, faint but constant, through the soles of my boots. And I remember Travis screaming. I turned, flashlight, beam jittering, but he wasn't beside me anymore. His voice came from further out, high and broken, calling my name. "Jake! Jake! Help me!" I ran toward the sound, rifle slapping against my shoulder. But after maybe 10 steps, I stopped. Because the glow had moved again. It was between me and his voice, and for the first time I realized I couldn't hear his footsteps, only his voice. "Jake!" I backed up. My chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself. I wanted to fire the rifle, but my hands were shaking too badly. The light pulsed once, more, brighter, then dimmer, and then Travis's voice cut off mid-word. Just gone. The silence that followed was worse than the scream. I don't remember running back to the truck. One moment I was standing there, frozen, and the next I was fumbling with the keys, skin slick with sweat, heart pounding like I'd sprinted a marathon. I must have left the rifle out there. I must have left everything. I drove blind down the dirt road, headlights bouncing off brush, until I hit the highway. I didn't stop driving until dawn broke over Fort Stockton. We filed a missing persons report the next day. Search teams went out. They found our chairs, the cooler, the speaker. They found boot prints, ours, heading east into the desert. But they never found Travis. His parents still call me sometimes, ask if I remember anything else. If maybe he wandered off, got lost, if maybe I heard coyotes and panicked, I tell them I don't know, because what else can I say? That their son was taken by a ball of light? It's been over a year now. I quit my job near Alpine, moved back closer to family. But some nights, when the air is still, I swear I hear him. His voice, thin and far, carried across the wind. And always that glow hangs in the back of my mind, waiting. I haven't been back to Marfa. I won't. But if you ever find yourself out there, on a clear desert night, and you see the lights dancing across the scrub, don't follow them. Don't wave, don't look too long, because once they notice you, they don't let go. I grew up in Wichita Falls, Texas. If you know anything about this town, you know it's flat, wide, and open, with skies that seem too big for the ground they stretch over. It's a place where the weather feels alive. Summer storms can roll in without warning, splitting the sky with green lightning, and the winds can change from calm to violent in a breath. My family lived there through the late 70s, and there's one night that has been spoken about in hushed tones ever since. The night of April 10th, 1979. The night of the Red River Valley tornado outbreak. That day is remembered for what they called Terrible Tuesday. 3 massive tornadoes tore through Wichita Falls, Vernon, and Seymour, killing dozens and leaving destruction so complete that parts of town looked bombed out. That much is public record. What isn't in the record is what my parents, my neighbors, and eventually I myself would come to believe, that there weren't 3 twisters that day. There were 4. The 4th was never reported by the Weather Service, never confirmed on radar, and officially never existed. But I saw it, and so did others. The problem is, I don't know if what we saw was something natural. I was 8 years old then, living on the south side of town. The day started hot, sticky, with that uneasy calm people around here know too well. The air felt thick, like syrup in your lungs. Even as a kid, I could sense the tension in the adults. My dad kept pacing from the living room to the porch, squinting up at the sky as if it might give him some kind of answer. My mom kept the radio on, low but constant, tuned to the weather broadcast. By late afternoon, the sky had turned the sick color I'd only seen once before. Not gray, not green, but something in between, like a bruise spreading across the horizon. The sirens went off around 5:30. Their wailing cut through the heavy air, and my mom shouted for us to get to the hallway. I remember crouching on the carpet with a blanket pulled over me while the windows rattled. The sound was unreal, like a jet engine mixed with low thunder that never stopped. Dad kept his transistor radio in one hand, muttering updates under his breath. Then he went still. He was listening hard, leaning his head toward the sound outside. "There's 2 of them," he said, 2 funnels, side by side. I didn't understand then, but I'd learned later that this was true. There were reports of twin tornadoes in the area. Some people swore they watched 2 separate funnels moving across the fields before they merged. But my dad's face looked off. Not just scared, confused. When the worst had passed, our house was still standing, though a few blocks down it was nothing but matchsticks. People staggered out into the street, checking on neighbors. I remember the smell more than anything, wet. Earth, snapped pine, and something metallic, sharp in the air. The whole sky still churned like it hadn't made up its mind if it was finished. And that's when I saw it. At the far end of the street, beyond the ruined houses, there was another funnel. only it wasn't touching the ground. It hung there, suspended, a massive dark column twisting down from the clouds but stopping maybe 50 feet above the rooftops. It didn't move, didn't shift or reach like the others had. It just hovered. "Look," I remember whispering to my mom, tugging at her sleeve. She followed my gaze and her face drained of color. She didn't say anything. She just grabbed me and pulled me back inside. Later, when the official reports came out, they said only one tornado had struck Wichita Falls directly. The one that carved through miles of homes, killing 42 people. No mention of anything else. But our block, our entire neighborhood had seen it. That hanging funnel. Silent, motionless, wrong. For years, I thought maybe I'd misremembered. Childhood fear twisting things out of shape. But as I got older, I'd overhear fragments of conversations between my parents and their friends. Quiet mentions of the phantom twister, of how it seemed to watch instead of destroy. My dad drank more after that day, staring too long at the sky during storm season. In 1992, I ran into an old neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds, at a grocery store. She was in her 60s by then, hair white, hands shaky. Out of nowhere, she asked me, "Do you remember the one that didn't touch down?" I felt cold all over. I nodded. She leaned in close and whispered, "It's not gone." Then she walked away. I've lived through plenty of storms since, but none have felt the same. Because every so often, maybe once every few years, I'll see something in the clouds. Not a full funnel, not a confirmed twister. Just a shape, low and dark, that lingers too long over the fields. It never touches down. It just hangs there, waiting. The last time was last spring. I was driving on I-44, late evening, sky boiling with thunderheads. Lightning lit the clouds from within, and for a second I swore I saw it again. That same black column frozen above the tree line. I nearly drove off the road staring at it. When I blinked, it was gone. Here's the part that keeps me up at night. My dad passed in 2008, and in his things I found an old spiral notebook. Most of it was nothing. Grocery lists, reminders, names of people he needed to call. But tucked near the back were drawings. Funnel clouds, dozens of them, sketched over and over. And in nearly every drawing there was one funnel that didn't touch the ground, a black column hovering just above rooftops. He'd written one word beside it, scrawled in shaky pen. "Watching." I don't know what we saw that night in 1979. I don't know why the Weather Service denies it. And I don't know why decades later it still shows itself when the skies turn dark. But I do know this. Tornadoes destroy. They rip and tear and move on. That's their nature. But this one, this thing, has waited nearly 50 years without ever striking. Which means whatever it's waiting for hasn't happened yet. I want to start this off by saying that I never believed in ghost stories. Not really. I grew up in San Antonio, where the so-called haunted railroad crossing has been a local legend for decades. If you don't know the story, it goes something like this. Back in the 1930s or maybe the 40s, a school bus full of kids stalled out on the tracks. A train came through and everyone on board was killed. Now if you stop your car on the tracks, they say invisible little hands push you across to safety. People even dust their bumpers with baby powder so they can see the handprints after. It's one of those stories kids dare each other to test out when they first get their driver's license. I'd heard it so many times growing up that it was background noise, like the Alamo ghost tours or the Donkey Lady Bridge. Local color, but nothing to take seriously. The thing is, the tracks aren't even there anymore. They tore them out years ago, which makes what happened to me a lot harder to explain. This was last summer, June 11th, 2024. I remember the exact date because it was the day after my cousin's graduation. It had been brutally hot that week, even by Texas standards, over 100 during the day, still sticky and humid at night. I couldn't sleep, so around midnight I decided to go for a drive, just to get out of the house and feel the AC in the car. I wasn't thinking about the crossing when I headed out. I just let the empty streets take me where they wanted. I had an old playlist running, the kind of music I used to burn on CDs back in high school. By the time I realized where I was, I was a block away from Shane Road, where the tracks used to run. The spot where people still go to test the legend. I slowed down without really deciding to. The night felt heavy, like the air had weight. My dashboard clock glowed 12:37. There weren't any other cars around, no cicadas buzzing, nothing. Just my tires crunching against the uneven asphalt. I pulled up to the spot where the pavement dipped slightly, the ghost of where the tracks had been, and I stopped. Now I swear to God I wasn't doing it to tempt fate. I just wanted to sit there for a second. The AC hummed. My headlights lit up a scraggly patch of weeds ahead, and I thought about how many times people must have dared each other to do exactly what I was doing. That's when I felt it. The car shifted. Subtle at first, like when a heavy truck drives past and the road vibrates under you. Only no truck passed. The movement kept going, a slow but steady push from behind. My foot was on the brake. I wasn't rolling downhill, wasn't in neutral. But my car began to creep forward anyway. I sat frozen, watching the weeds in my headlights move closer. The wheel vibrated under my hands. My heart was thudding so hard I could feel it in my ears. And then, clear as day, I heard something over the AC fan. Children's voices. Not laughter, not words, just this faint, overlapping murmur, like a crowd whispering in a church. High-pitched, urgent. I snapped my head around, half expecting to see someone at my window. Nothing, just the night. That's when instinct took over. I slammed the gas. The car lurched forward, tires squealing, and I didn't stop until I was half a mile down the road, chest heaving like I'd just run a sprint. I told myself it was my imagination. The heat, the music, the ghost stories I'd grown up with. Maybe my car slipped on the old asphalt. Maybe the AC fan caught a weird frequency that sounded like voices. I almost believed that, until I got home. When I pulled into the driveway and stepped out, I noticed the back of my car in the porch light. My trunk and bumper were smudged. Dozens of prints, cloudy and pale against the dark paint. Small, child-sized. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I washed the car. Told myself it was dust, road grime, anything. But when I sprayed it down, the prints didn't wash off right away. They lingered in the beads of water, like they'd been pressed deep into the finish. Didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe me? But 2 weeks later, I caved and told my sister, Jen. She just stared at me wide-eyed. "You shouldn't have stopped there," she said. "Don't you know what people say?" I laughed it off, tried to play the skeptic. "It's just an urban legend." I probably psyched myself out. Jen didn't laugh. "They took the tracks out for a reason." "What reason?" She didn't answer, just shook her head and went back to scrolling on her phone. That night I dreamed about a bus. It was old, the kind with rounded edges and chipped yellow paint. I was sitting in the driver's seat, except I couldn't move my arms. Couldn't move at all. The bus was stalled on the tracks, and through the windshield I could see a light bearing down. A train headlight, impossibly bright, growing larger every second. The worst part wasn't the train, it was the children. I could see their faces in the big mirror above the windshield. Row after row of them, all staring at me. Not screaming, not crying, just staring. I woke up with my sheets damp with sweat, heart hammering like I'd run a marathon. The dreams came back, again and again. Always the bus, always the train, always those silent children. By July, I started seeing things when I was awake. At first, it was just shadows flickering at the edge of my vision. Then I'd catch glimpses of small shapes standing by the roadside when I drove home at night. Once, I swore I saw a little girl in a white dress standing in my backyard. I ran out with a flashlight, but the grass was empty. I stopped sleeping, stopped driving past Shane Road, but it didn't matter. Whatever I'd woken up that night seemed to have followed me home. 2 weeks ago, I found handprints again, this time on the inside of my bedroom window. I live on the second floor. I don't know what they want. I don't know if they're trying to warn me or punish me for something I don't understand. All I know is that I hear them now. Every night, when the house is quiet. Faint voices, urgent whispers, right outside my door. And sometimes beneath it all, the low, distant sound of a train that never comes. I was driving through Texas late last summer, trying to make it from Dallas to San Antonio overnight without stopping. I'd underestimated how exhausting the I-35 corridor could feel when you'd already been awake since sunrise, running errands, and then decided at 8 in the evening that you had enough energy to just drive it in one go. By the time it was past midnight, my vision had started to blur, and every set of taillights looked like two red ghosts hovering in front of me. I told myself I'd just find a gas station, maybe grab a soda or something sugary to keep me going. The GPS showed a small town a few miles ahead. Nothing I'd ever heard of, just one of those places you fly by without thinking about. But as I drove in, I noticed most of it was asleep. A few dark storefronts, a single gas station with all its lights off. It looked abandoned. That's when I saw the diner. It sat right off the road, perched on the edge of town like it didn't quite belong to it. The neon sign just said, "Diner," in bold red letters, and though a few letters flickered, the place looked open. More than open, it looked almost staged. Every booth had its blinds down. The parking lot was lined perfectly with maybe 8 or 9 cars, each parked neatly between faded white lines. I figured this was it, my chance to wake up, get some caffeine, maybe fries. When I stepped inside, though, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No clinking of plates. No scraping of forks. Not even the muted sound of a kitchen grill. The place wasn't empty either. Almost every booth had at least one person sitting in it, some 2 or 3. They all sat upright, food in front of them, eating slowly. But there wasn't a sound. Not the hum of conversation, not the shuffle of a waitress's shoes, not even the creak of the vinyl booths when someone shifted. The only sound was the faint jingle of the door when I came in. After that, it went still again, like I had just entered a church mid-service. A woman in a pale blue uniform, probably the waitress, appeared from the kitchen and gestured to a booth without saying anything. I tried to smile at her, but she didn't respond. Just that same silent, expectant stare. I slid into the booth she pointed at. The menu was already there, laminated and a little sticky. It looked like every other diner menu I'd seen. Pancakes, burgers, fries, eggs all day. But I noticed there were no prices. I glanced around, half expecting someone to break the silence, maybe laugh and say it was just a local quirk. Nobody did. Everyone just chewed, methodical and slow, their eyes fixed either on their plates or the table surface. The waitress reappeared with a notepad. Still not saying a word, she just clicked her pen once and looked at me. I said, my voice louder than I meant it to be in that dead quiet place. "Coffee? Black. And fries, please." She scribbled something and walked away. My words felt wrong in that space, like I'd just broken some rule I didn't know about. Nobody turned to look at me, but I swear the air got heavier, like everyone heard me and chose not to react. I tried to distract myself by checking my phone. No service. That was weird because I'd had bars the whole drive. I set it face down on the table. When the waitress came back, she set down a steaming cup of coffee and a plate of fries. I thanked her automatically. She didn't nod, didn't acknowledge it, just turned and walked away. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter, almost burnt, but it worked. I felt a little more alert. The fries were warm, crispy, salted just enough. Normal food, in the most abnormal atmosphere I'd ever felt. Halfway through, I heard something. Not a word exactly. More, like a sharp inhale. I looked up. A man 2 booths down had paused with his fork midair, staring at me. His eyes were wide, and his lips moved like he wanted to speak. But before he did, the waitress appeared behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He froze, lowered his fork, and went back to eating, slower than before. That was when I realized nobody had spoken a single word since I came in. Not to each other, not to the staff. Nothing. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Maybe it was some kind of themed diner, a silent experience thing. I'd read about restaurants like that in big cities where everyone agreed not to talk. But this wasn't Austin or Dallas. This was a half-dead town off I-35, and nobody had asked me to keep quiet. I decided to finish quickly and leave. The fries were half gone, the coffee almost drained when the door opened again. Another traveler came in, a guy in his 30s, beard, baseball cap, looked like a trucker. He walked in confidently, muttering to himself as he took off his cap. "Man, finally," he said. "I was starving." The silence of the diner seemed to recoil. The waitress appeared instantly, pointing him toward a booth. He looked around, confused. "Y'all open, right? What's with the quiet?" He laughed. "Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked." "Okay," he said, shrugging, and sat down across from me since my booth was only half occupied. He grinned at me. "Weird vibe, huh?" I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, the waitress slammed his menu down on the table so hard the dishes rattled. She glared at him, then at me, and walked off. The guy raised his eyebrows. "Well, that's customer service for you." He leaned closer. "What's with this place? Everyone look like they're in a cult or something?" His voice carried in, the silence. Too much. I felt exposed, just sitting near him. The man in the booth across the aisle dropped his fork. It clattered against the plate, the sound like a gunshot in the quiet. He froze, eyes darting toward the kitchen. The waitress was already there, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. The trucker lowered his voice. "Seriously, man, what the hell is this?" I shook my head, barely whispering. "Don't. Just eat. Don't talk." He frowned like I was messing with him. But before he could say anything else, two men came out from the kitchen. They weren't dressed like cooks, just plain black clothes, aprons tied tight, faces blank. They walked over to the trucker's booth. "Hey," he said nervously. "I didn't mean anything." They grabbed him by the arms, fast, efficient, like they'd done it before. He shouted, struggled, but nobody else looked. Nobody. They dragged him toward the back, through a door marked "Employees Only." His voice cut off the moment. The door slammed. The silence returned. Heavy. Final. I sat frozen, heart pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. The waitress appeared again, her face calm now, and slid my check onto the table. No total, just a blank slip with a single line. Cash only. I pulled out a 20, left it under the slip, and stood up. My legs felt weak, but I made myself walk slowly, calmly, toward the door. Every eye in the diner stayed fixed on their plates, chewing, swallowing, silent. When I stepped outside, the air felt like freedom. I didn't look back. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove until the diner's red neon glow vanished in the rearview mirror. I didn't stop again until San Antonio, where I sat in a motel parking lot, hands shaking, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, that it was some nightmare cooked up by exhaustion. But my phone still had no service until morning. I've looked since. I tried to find that town again, that diner. Nothing. Not on Google Maps, not on any forum. I've even driven the route, again in daylight, wide awake. It isn't there, but sometimes when I pass through Texas at night, I swear I see a red flicker far off the highway, like a neon sign through the trees, and I keep driving. It was September 18th, 2022, a Sunday evening when I started my solo backpacking trip into Big Bend National Park. I remember the exact time because I checked my watch before I set out from the trailhead, 6:42 p.m. The sun was low but still spilling a reddish glow across the desert. The weather was clear, not a cloud in sight, and the air was dry with that faint mineral tang you only get in the desert after a hot day. I had been planning this trip for months. My intention was simple: 3 nights alone in the backcountry. No phone service, no people, just me and the desert silence. I had been craving solitude, maybe even a little discomfort, because I thought I needed to clear my head. The first day went smoothly. I followed the trail along the foothills where scrub brush and twisted ocotillo stood like skeletal fingers against the fading sky. The land felt enormous, empty in a way that made me both small and free. I had camped alone before, but never somewhere this vast, this untouched. As night fell, I set up my small tent, boiled water on my camp stove, and ate a packet of freeze-dried chili. The stars came out one by one until the sky was thick with them, so clear it was almost overwhelming. It should have been peaceful, and in a way it was. But even on that first night, there was a strange heaviness in the air, something that made me glance over my shoulder more than usual. I told myself it was just the emptiness playing tricks on me. When you're alone in the desert, the silence presses on you until even the crunch of your boot or the rustle of nylon sounds unnatural. I drifted to sleep with that silence ringing in my ears. The second day was uneventful. I woke early, packed up, and continued deeper into the park. I didn't see another human being all day, which was exactly what I wanted. By mid-afternoon, though, I started feeling that same nagging sensation again, like I wasn't truly alone. It was subtle. Never footsteps, never voices, but the prickling awareness you get when you're sure someone is just outside your vision. I stopped several times, turning slowly, scanning the landscape. Just desert. Just shadows stretching long in the sun. That night, things changed. I set up camp near a dry wash, with a flat area perfect for my tent. The sun dipped behind the mountains, and I watched the sky bruise purple before the stars came out again. I sat outside my tent for a long time, sipping from my water bottle, listening to the faint hiss of the breeze. When I finally turned in, it was close to 10 p.m. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I woke, but the desert was darker than I'd ever seen it. The moon must have set because the stars were sharper, colder. I lay there listening, and that's when I realized something was wrong. The silence wasn't complete anymore. There was a sound, so faint at first I thought I was imagining it. It was like the soft crunch of sand, a dragging shuffle, irregular but persistent. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. The footsteps, or whatever they were, circled the edge of my campsite, pausing, then continuing. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, staring at the nylon walls of my tent. I considered unzipping it to look, but something in my gut told me not to. The sound went on for maybe 10 minutes before stopping completely. I lay awake until dawn, my body rigid, waiting for it to start again. By morning, everything looked normal. My campsite was undisturbed, no tracks around the tent, nothing to prove I'd heard what I'd heard. I laughed at myself, told myself it was probably just a javelina or some other animal nosing around. But when I packed up, I couldn't shake the thought that the steps had sounded too deliberate, too human. That evening, after another long day of hiking, I stopped at a spot with a wide view of the mountains, the desert stretching endlessly below. The sunset painted everything gold, but I barely noticed, because as I pitched my tent, I saw it for the first time. I was standing with the sun at my back and my shadow stretched long in front of me across the sand. But there was something wrong with it. At first I couldn't pinpoint it, just stared, confused. Then it hit me. My shadow was still standing when I wasn't. I had bent down to tighten a strap on my pack, but my shadow stayed upright for a moment before slowly following, lagging behind like it was delayed. I stood up straight, heart pounding, and watched. My shadow rose too, a fraction too slow, like it had to remember what it was supposed to do. I moved my arm back and forth. The shadow did the same, but just slightly after, like a bad reflection on an old screen. I told myself I was tired, dehydrated. The desert light was playing tricks. But when the sun finally dipped low enough to swallow the shadow, I felt a knot of relief in my chest I couldn't deny. That night was worse than the last. I didn't even try to sleep at first. I sat outside, my tent staring into the black desert, waiting. Hours passed, the stars spinning above until the footsteps came back. This time they were closer, circling slower. And when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I whispered, "Hello?" The sound stopped instantly. The silence was crushing. My own pulse filled my ears. Then from somewhere in the dark came a whisper back. Not loud, not clear, but enough that I heard it. Enough that it was unmistakably a voice. I couldn't make out the words, but it was my voice. I bolted into the tent and zipped it shut, even though I knew the nylon wouldn't protect me. I sat there gripping my knife, listening, but the voice never came again. Just the occasional crunch of sand moving further away until it was gone. By the final day, I was a wreck. My water was low, my nerves shredded. Every time the sun caught me, I checked my shadow, and every time it lagged just enough to send chills through me. Sometimes I thought I saw it standing taller than me, its head turning slightly when mine didn't. When I finally made it back to the trailhead, the parking lot was empty, my car the only one there. I didn't even stop to change my boots or drop my pack. I just threw everything inside and drove. I didn't feel safe until I was hours away, cell service back on my phone, other cars around me on the highway. It's been nearly a year now. I've never gone back to Big Bend. I don't camp alone anymore. But I've noticed something I can't ignore. In certain light, streetlights at night, the late afternoon sun, I still catch it. My shadow lagging, just a little, just enough. And once, a few weeks ago, I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I turned on the light, stumbled in, and looked down. My shadow was already there, waiting. My name isn't important, but for context, I'm in my early 30s and have lived in Corpus Christi, Texas, my entire life. I work as a mechanic at a small garage off Leopard Street. Nothing glamorous, just enough to pay the bills and keep the fridge full. What I'm about to tell you happened last year in August of 2024. I've tried to keep it to myself, but lately, I can't sleep without hearing the phone in my head, and maybe writing it out will get the weight off my chest. It started on a Tuesday night, August 13th, 2024. I remember because it had been one of those miserably hot days where the humidity clung to your skin no matter how many showers you took. It was about 9:45 p.m. when the first call came. My wife, Anna, was folding laundry in the living room, and I was dozing on the couch with the TV still on. The phone on the wall rang, an old beige landline that had been installed in the house decades before we even moved in. The thing is, that landline had been disconnected 2 years earlier. We'd canceled it after realizing we never used it. Everyone called us on our cells. The cord was still there out of habit, I guess. One of those things you never bother to rip out because it just blends into the background. So when it rang, the sound was so startling it jolted me upright. Anna froze, one of my t-shirts still folded halfway in her hands. Did you hear that?" she asked. I was already on my feet. "That can't be right," I said. But the phone kept ringing, shrill and steady, just like it always had back when it was connected. I picked it up before thinking. There was no dial tone, no static, nothing. Just silence. I remember standing there, pressing the receiver to my ear, listening to absolutely nothing. Then, after maybe 5 seconds, a voice came through. Low, raspy, clear. "Get out." That was it. 2 words, then the line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the wall. Anna was looking at me, waiting for me to say something. I put the phone down slowly and told her it must have been some kind of cross signal. Maybe interference, maybe a prank, something logical. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew it wasn't. That night, neither of us slept well. Every creak in the house felt louder than usual, every shadow in the hallway deeper. Around 3 in the morning, Anna whispered that maybe we should just unplug the phone. I agreed, but when I walked into the kitchen, the phone was already unplugged. The cord dangled loose from the wall, just as it had since the day we canceled the line. The calls didn't stop. The next one came on Thursday, then Saturday, each time around 9:45 at night. Always the same thing. The phone would ring, I'd pick up, and the same voice would rasp, "Get out." No other words, no variation. After the 3rd time, Anna refused to be in the same room when the call came. She started sleeping in the bedroom with the door locked, while I sat in the living room waiting for the phone. I can't explain why I kept answering. Maybe some stupid sense of challenge, maybe just fear disguised as curiosity. But each time the message was identical. "Get out." Then silence. I finally called the phone company. They swore up and down that the line had been dead for years. No signal, no service, no billing. The guy even laughed a little, told me maybe I was dreaming it. I wasn't dreaming. On the sixth call, things changed. It was August 21st, a Wednesday. It had been raining hard all evening. The kind of Gulf storm that rattles the windows and makes the streetlights flicker. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cold beer sweating in my hand, when the phone rang. I picked it up without hesitation. This time, instead of the usual rasp, there was breathing. Heavy, wet, like someone had run a mile and then pressed their mouth right up against the receiver. "Who is this?" I asked. The breathing paused, then resumed, slower this time, deliberate. "Who are you?" the voice whispered back. Not "get out." Not the usual, just those 3 words. For the first time, I slammed the receiver down. Anna came into the kitchen when she heard the slam. Her face was pale. She didn't ask what it said. I think she could see it in my eyes. That night, we decided we'd had enough. The next morning, Anna called her brother, who lived in San Antonio, and told him we might come stay with him for a while. He told us we were welcome any time. We both agreed to pack that weekend and leave before Sunday, but the phone didn't wait. Friday night, August 23rd, it rang again, 9:45 sharp. Anna begged me not to answer it, but I felt like if I didn't, it would only get worse. I picked it up, my hand sweating so much I nearly dropped it. This time, the voice wasn't rasping, it was clear. Cold, calm. "You waited too long." Then the line went dead. That was the night everything came apart. Around midnight, the power went out. The whole neighborhood was dark, but our house felt darker somehow, like even the moonlight refused to come through the windows. Anna lit a candle, and we sat in the living room clutching each other, waiting for morning. That was when the phone rang again. No power, no service, no reason for it to ring, but it did. I remember Anna screaming at me not to touch it, but I did. The voice whispered, so close it felt like it was inside my head. "We're already here." I dropped the receiver, but the sound didn't stop. The whisper kept going, even though the phone lay on the floor, disconnected. Words spilling out, low and urgent like prayers or commands in a language I couldn't recognize. The candle blew out, and in that sudden, suffocating darkness, something moved in the hallway. I can't describe it well. A shape, taller than the doorway, its edges wrong like static on an old TV. It didn't walk, it didn't crawl, it just shifted closer, every time the whisper on the floor grew louder. Anna grabbed my arm so hard her nails broke skin, and that was what snapped me out of it. I pulled her toward the back door and we ran into the yard barefoot, rain soaking us instantly. Behind us, through the kitchen window, the phone lay on the floor, the receiver still humming with that inhuman voice. And for just a second, in the flicker of lightning, I swore I saw the shape standing over it. We never went back. The next day, we packed what we could from the driveway, refusing to step inside. We moved in with Anna's brother in San Antonio, and after a few months, we found a rental. Our old house on Leopard Street is still there. I checked once, online. Someone else is living in it now. I wonder if they've heard the phone ring, and I wonder if they listened long enough to hear the words change. It was Friday, October 16th, 2020, the first real cold front of the season here in Fort Worth. The kind that blew in overnight with enough bite to turn the air crisp and knock the lingering mosquitoes down for a while. The forecast said low 40s by morning, but when I clocked out of work at 6:30 p.m., the temperature gauge on my dash already hovered at 53. The sun was bleeding out behind the line of cottonwoods along the Trinity River as I drove home. I remember that detail because it was one of those dusks that looks deceptively calm. Pink-orange sky, a thin layer of mist clinging to the low ground. The kind of evening you feel in your chest. I rolled my windows down, let the cold air sting my face, and thought about how badly I needed a drink. My buddy Kyle texted me while I was heating up leftover chili. "You down to ride out to Lake Worth tonight? Heard the screams been heard?" Again. Now, if you're from around here, you know Lake Worth's got a reputation. Not just the goatman crap kids like to bring up, but the scream. Supposedly for decades, people hanging out at night have heard a woman's scream carry across the water. Some swear it's high and panicked. Others say it's low and guttural, like somebody being strangled. No one agrees on the exact sound, but everyone agrees on one thing. It's blood-curdling. The city's combed that lake 100 times for bodies. Nothing's ever been found. But the stories linger. I wasn't in the mood, honestly. I'd had a long week and just wanted to crash, but something about the cold snap, the way it felt like fall had arrived in a single gust, pushed me into saying yes. I told myself I was just going for the beer and the company. By 9, I was pulling my truck onto Shoreline Drive, headlights sweeping across scattered parked cars lined along the shoulder. It was darker out there than I expected. The moon hidden behind a bank of low clouds. No street lamps, only the occasional glint of a beer can in the grass when my brights caught it. Kyle and 2 others, Chris and a girl I didn't know named Jordan, were standing near the guardrail, passing around a bottle of Fireball. I grabbed my jacket from the seat and joined them. "You came," Kyle said, grinning. His breath showed white in the air. "Didn't have anything better to do," I said. We sat on the cold metal rail, talking crap about work, about the Cowboys' sorry season, about nothing in particular. The water down below was black glass, the kind that swallows light instead of reflecting it. Every few minutes a fish jumped, breaking the surface with a hollow smack. Time slipped by like that. Laughter, the bite of whiskey, the faint sound of traffic carrying from Jacksboro Highway in the distance. Around 10:15, the girl Jordan asked, "So, does anyone actually believe the scream's real? Or is it just some urban legend thing people keep alive for fun?" Kyle smirked. "You'll see." I hated how sure he sounded. At 10:30, Chris pulled out his phone. "Weather app says wind chills 48, no wonder my hands feel like ice." He blew into them. We kept waiting. Nothing happened. No scream, no weird noises, not even a coyote yipping in the distance. Around 11 I started regretting the whole thing. My stomach burned from too much cinnamon whiskey and the air was colder by the minute. I was about to call it when it happened. It started faint, so faint I thought it was just the wind. A long rising note drifting across the lake. Not quite human, not quite animal, but threaded with something that made my skin prickle. The sound sharpened as it carried. Higher, fuller, undeniably a scream now. It wasn't short. It didn't cut off the way you'd expect if someone was startled. It went on, building, trembling, a sustained cry that echoed off the water and through the trees until I felt it in my teeth. Jordan clamped her hands over her ears. "Oh my God. What the hell is that?" Chris stood up, swaying a little. "It's a trick. Has to be." But he didn't sound convinced. The scream went on for a good 30 seconds before tapering into a broken sob that seemed to dissolve into the mist hanging over the lake. Then silence. No one said anything for a long while. My hands were trembling and I shoved them in my jacket pockets so the others wouldn't notice. Kyle finally spoke. "Told you. Happens a few times a year. Always right here, always at night." "That wasn't a coyote," Jordan whispered. "That wasn't anything normal." I wanted to believe it was some kind of animal call distorted by the water, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I'd heard foxes scream before. I'd heard bobcats. This was different, too human, too close. We should have left then, but of course we didn't. Chris wanted to drive around to the far side of the lake to see if the sound carried differently. Against my better judgment, I agreed to follow in my truck. We caravanned along winding backroads lined with scrub oak and abandoned bait shops until we reached a dirt pull-off on the north shore. By then it was past midnight, the whiskey wearing off, the cold sobering. We killed the engines and sat on our hoods waiting. Nothing happened for almost an hour, just the lapping of water, the occasional splash of a fish. Then, without warning, the scream tore through the night again, louder this time, closer. It didn't come from across the lake. It came from the shoreline, maybe 100 yards to our left. Jordan gasped and grabbed Kyle's arm. Chris muttered, "No way, no way." I don't know what made me do it, but I slid off my hood, pulled a flashlight from the truck, and started walking toward the sound. "Dude, are you insane?" Kyle called after me, but none of them followed. The beam of my flashlight cut through the trees, illuminating branches, brush, trash left behind by other night drinkers. The air smelled like wet earth and stagnant water. My boots crunched gravel, then softened in the mud near the edge. I kept expecting to see someone, maybe a drunk woman lost in the woods, maybe kids trying to scare us. But the shoreline was empty. Just water rippling black and silver under the weak glow of my light. Then I heard it. Not the scream, but breathing. Ragged, wet, just beyond the circle of light. "Hello?" My voice cracked. The breathing stopped. Don't remember deciding to turn back, but suddenly I was walking fast, then jogging, then running toward the trucks. My chest felt tight, my stomach hollow. The others were waiting with wide eyes. "Well?" Chris demanded. "Nothing." I lied. We left right after that. Nobody argued. I told myself I wouldn't think about it again, that it was just some stupid night fueled by whiskey and suggestion. But I can't stop replaying it. The scream, yes, but worse than that, the breathing. The way it paused when I spoke, like whatever it was had been listening. That was almost 5 years ago. I haven't been back to Lake Worth since. But last night, just as I was falling asleep, I swear I heard it again. Faint, but clear. A woman's scream carrying through the air, rising until it broke into a sob. Only this time, it wasn't outside. It was inside my house. It was the summer of 2021 when I drove through Midland, Texas, the kind of trip that was supposed to be boring. My boss sent me down there for 3 days to check on a client's equipment order, which mostly meant babysitting a delivery and signing a few papers. Nothing glamorous. I flew into Midland International Airport on July 17th, a Saturday. The forecast was a steady 103 degrees during the day, dipping down into the upper 70s at night. If you've ever been to that part of Texas, you know how the air feels thick with heat, like the world itself is baking under a broiler. I had rented a silver Chevy Malibu, the kind of car I wouldn't remember 2 weeks later if not for everything that happened. I stayed at a La Quinta just outside of town, near Loop 250. The hotel smelled faintly of chlorine and cigarettes, even though it was supposedly non-smoking. My room had 2 queen beds, beige carpet, and a faulty AC unit that rattled when it kicked on. The kind of place you don't take your socks off in. Sunday was uneventful. I checked emails, walked across the street to a Whataburger, and drove, aimlessly for a while just to kill time. That's when I first heard the story. At the gas station off Rankin Highway, I asked the cashier if there were any places to eat besides the usual chains. He was a wiry guy, maybe mid-30s, with a sunburned neck and hands that looked stained from oil or grease. He asked where I was from, and when I said Dallas, he grinned like he had something to share. "You seen the rig fire yet?" he asked, leaning on the counter. I frowned, thinking he meant a live site accident. "A rig fire?" "Yeah," he said. "Out by Highway 349. You can see it most nights, the flames. Been burning 30-some years, maybe more. My uncle worked out there back in the 80s. I figured he was pulling my leg, so I asked, "What's it called?" He shrugged. "Doesn't have a name. They kept the well back in the day. Site's empty now, but folks still see it burning. My uncle swore you could smell the smoke when the wind blew right." He rang up my bottle of water and peanuts like he hadn't just dropped that casually, then went back to watching his tiny TV behind the counter. I thought about it that night in the hotel. I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghost stories, but Midland doesn't give you much to do, and boredom makes you curious. The next evening, after dinner at a diner off Big Spring Street, I drove out on 349. It was about 9:15 p.m. The sun had dropped, leaving that lingering pink-orange glow across the flat desert horizon. The highway was nearly empty, just an occasional 18-wheeler blasting past with a low roar. About 20 minutes south of town, I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a refinery flare stack, but the light was wrong. It wasn't steady or controlled. It flickered like something raging, rising and falling like heat shimmering off asphalt in summer. A deep, dull orange glow sat low on the horizon, pulsing faintly. I slowed down and pulled onto the gravel shoulder. My tires crunched as I rolled to a stop. For a moment, I thought I really was seeing a fire. But when I turned off the car and stepped outside, there was nothing. Just silence. No crackle, no smoke, no smell of burning. The desert stretched out, empty. And yet, when I looked back toward the horizon, the glow was still there. I told myself it was a mirage, or distant lights from an oil facility, but it looked exactly like flames licking at the night sky. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes before the unease set in. The longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. My skin prickled. I got back in the car and drove on, telling myself not to be stupid. The next morning, I asked the delivery driver, a guy named Cole, if he'd ever heard of the burning rig. He was mid-40s, heavyset, friendly enough. We were waiting outside a warehouse, and I figured he'd know local lore. "Oh, sure," he said, spitting tobacco juice into a bottle. "That's an old one. My dad used to scare us kids with. It said a rig caught fire out there in '85, burned down to nothing and killed some men. Company cleaned it up, but some nights you still see it. He told us it was the souls of the crew stuck relighting the fire over and over." He grinned, but his eyes stayed flat. "Creeped me out when I was a kid," he added. "Now I figure, it's just gases leaking, who knows? But I've seen it myself twice. Both times I got this real bad feeling, like something watching." That last part stuck with me. That night, I drove out again. This time, I went further down 349, past where I'd stopped before. Around 10 p.m., I saw the glow again, brighter now. I pulled off on a dirt road and followed it for about half a mile, headlights bouncing over the ruts. The land was flat and empty, dotted with mesquite shrubs and rusting fence posts. When I cut the engine, the silence pressed in hard. There's something about desert silence at night. It feels physical, like a weight on your chest. I rolled the window down and listened. The glow was stronger. Still no smoke, no crackling, just that flickering light. Against my better judgment, I got out with my phone flashlight. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the horizon. The desert smelled dry and faintly metallic like hot iron. After maybe 5 minutes, I realized something that made me stop cold. The glow wasn't getting closer. It looked just as far away as it had from the highway, even though I'd been walking straight toward it. My stomach knotted. I turned back, but for a split second I thought I saw something move in the corner of my vision. A black shape, low to the ground, darting between the scrub. I spun my light around, heart hammering. But there was nothing there. Just flat dirt and shrubs. That was enough. I ran back to the car, slammed the door, and sped back to town, gravel pinging against the fenders. I barely slept that night. The AC rattled and the shadows under the door looked too deep. Around 3 a.m., I thought, I heard footsteps in the hall, slow and heavy, stopping right outside my room. But when I looked through the peephole, it was empty. On my last night in Midland, I made the mistake of going back one more time. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or some stupid need to prove to myself that it was just a trick of the light. This time I parked farther out, maybe 30 miles down 349, where the desert feels endless. The glow was there again, faint but steady. I sat in the car with the lights off, just staring. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, even though I told myself it was nothing. Then, without warning, my radio crackled to life. I hadn't touched it. The dial was turned all the way down, but suddenly static hissed through the speakers, sharp and violent. Beneath it, I swear I heard voices, faint, overlapping, like men shouting orders through the roar of fire. I froze, staring at the glowing horizon, and for just a moment I smelled it. Smoke. Thick, oily, acrid smoke, the kind that burns your throat. My eyes watered. And then it was gone. The static cut out, leaving the radio dead silent. The smell vanished. The glow flickered once like a candle about to go out. But it didn't. It stayed. That was the last time I saw it. The next morning, I drove straight to the airport, dropped off the rental car, and flew home. I haven't been back to Midland since. I still don't know what I saw. Maybe it really is leaking gas. Maybe it's some optical trick of the desert air. But when I close my eyes at night, sometimes I hear that static again, faint and crackling. And every once in a while, I wake up choking on the smell of smoke. When I look out my bedroom window, I swear I see a dull orange glow on the horizon. Live 300 miles from Midland, and the desert doesn't burn here. I don't usually share things like this, but after what happened last spring, I've found myself lying awake every night, staring at the ceiling, hearing things that aren't there. Maybe writing it all down will help. Maybe not. I just know I can't keep it bottled inside anymore. It was March 19th, 2022, a Saturday. I remember that because the weather had taken one of those weird Texas turns, 70 degrees in the afternoon, warm enough to sit outside in a t-shirt, then dropping to the mid-40s by nightfall. The day had been windy, skies pale blue, the air carrying that dry smell of dust you get out west. By the time evening settled in, the wind had gone still, like someone had switched off a fan. My girlfriend at the time, Marissa, had been nagging me for weeks to take her somewhere with history instead of another road trip to Austin or San Antonio for music or food. She was into haunted places, and I guess I'd humored her enough times that it had become kind of our thing. She suggested we drive to Goliad, about 2 hours from where we lived, to visit Presidio La Bahia. She'd read about it in some paranormal blog, an old Spanish fort from the 1700s where soldiers were held and executed during the Texas Revolution. According to her, people swore that late at night you could still hear voices, like a choir, singing hymns from inside the chapel. Wasn't exactly thrilled. I'm not the type to get spooked by stories, but I also don't buy into them either. Still, I agreed, mostly because I liked the drive. Long stretches of highway at night calm me down. We left around 6:30, the sun already sinking low, and bleeding the sky orange behind us. By the time we got into Goliad, it was quiet. The kind of quiet you only notice in small towns where the street's empty after dark. A few gas stations were lit up and a Whataburger sign glowed in the distance. Everything else looked shuttered. When we pulled up to the fort, the place was exactly what I'd pictured. Thick stone walls, the chapel's white dome faintly glowing under the yellow lamps. The parking lot was empty. Marissa was grinning, bouncing with excitement. See? Perfect. We'll have it all to ourselves. I laughed. Yeah, that's one way to put it. We walked through the front gate. Even though I knew it was just stone and mortar, I felt something strange cross over me. Like the air got heavier, thicker. The kind of pressure that makes your ears ring faintly. I didn't say anything because Marissa would have taken it as a sign that ghosts were real. The place was silent. No crickets, no wind, not even the hum of traffic from the highway. Just the crunch of our shoes on gravel. She wanted to start in the chapel, so we crossed the courtyard. The heavy wooden doors weren't locked. Inside, the air smelled faintly, of wax like old candles. The walls were cool to the touch and our footsteps echoed too loudly. Marissa whispered, "It feels like a church should feel. Sacred." I wanted to agree, but something about the emptiness put me on edge. The only light came from the lamps outside, slanting in through the small windows, casting long bars across the floor. We sat in one of the pews. She closed her eyes like she was trying to feel something. I stared at the altar, trying not to fidget. After a while, the silence felt unbearable. Then, very faintly, I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind working its way through cracks in the stone. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. It wasn't the wind. It was voices. Distant. Low, like the hum of people singing in another room. Not clear enough to make out words, but definitely layered voices like a hymn. I froze. My first instinct was to glance at Marissa. Her eyes were wide. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. I nodded. We sat perfectly still, listening. The sound swelled slightly, as if more voices were joining in, though the air around us remained completely still. Finally, I stood up, trying to rationalize. "Probably a recording," I said. For the tourists. They pipe in sound sometimes at these places. Marissa shook her head hard. No, it's live. Her voice carried a certainty that made my stomach tighten. I stepped into the aisle, craning my head toward the front of the chapel, then toward the back. The sound didn't seem to come from any one direction. It was just there, filling the space, pressing against my eardrums, and then it stopped. Just like that. Gone. No fading, no trailing off. Just silence. Marissa whispered, "They know we're here." I wanted to roll my eyes, but I couldn't, shake the feeling that she was right in some way. The silence felt heavier than before. We stood there for a minute, waiting. Nothing. Finally, I said, "Come on, let's check out the courtyard." We walked back out, and the air felt colder. Then when we'd gone in, our footsteps crunched on the gravel again, louder than they should have been. Marissa stuck close to me, which was unusual for her. Normally she loved this kind of thing, but now she looked unsettled. We wandered along the stone wall, peeking into some of the rooms that had been converted into little museum exhibits. Muskets behind glass, faded uniforms, yellowed documents, the normal kind of historical stuff. But in each room I felt the same thing, the sense that someone had just stepped out, like we'd walked in a moment too late to catch them. At one point, I thought I saw movement in the corner of my vision, a shadow slipping through a doorway. But when I turned, nothing was there. Around 9:30, we decided to head back to the chapel one last time before leaving. As we crossed the courtyard, I felt something I can't explain. The hairs on my arms stood up. My chest tightened. The air tasted metallic, like blood. Marissa stopped walking. Her face had gone pale. "Do you hear that?" I strained my ears. At first, nothing. Then slowly, it returned. The voices. Louder, this time. Definite words, though, in a language I didn't understand. Latin, maybe? The sound was coming from inside the chapel. No question. I whispered. Maybe other visitors showed up. But when we reached the doors, the windows were dark. No light, no movement. Just the voices, rising and falling in perfect unison. Marissa grabbed my sleeve. "Don't go in." I hesitated, hand on the handle. My brain screamed at me to leave it alone, but some part of me, curiosity, stubbornness, I don't know, pushed me forward. I pulled the door open. The singing stopped instantly. The chapel was empty. Stone walls, wooden pews, stillness. And then, clear as day, a voice whispered right next to my ear. "Salve." I jumped back, slamming the door shut. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might tear out of my chest. Marissa was crying now, muttering, I told you. I told you." We ran to the car. I fumbled the keys, nearly dropped them, finally jammed them into the ignition. The whole way out of Goliad, neither of us spoke. The silence in the car was suffocating. It's been over a year now, and I still don't know what happened. I tried, looking up explanations, faulty acoustics, recordings, pranks, but nothing fits. Marissa and I broke up a few months later. Not because of that night, at least not directly. But I think it changed the way we looked at each other. She was convinced we'd heard the dead. I just wanted to pretend it hadn't happened. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I swear I hear it again, that low hum of voices somewhere just beyond the walls of my room. And every single time it's followed by that same word, whispered right behind my ear, salve. It was Friday, October 13th, 2017. The date didn't mean much to me at the time, beyond the usual jokes about Friday the 13th. I'd just finished a week of double shifts at the shop, and for once I had no real plans. The weather had finally cooled off, one of those rare, crisp evenings in North Texas when the humidity dips low and the air actually feels breathable. It had rained lightly that morning, leaving the ground damp, and by late evening the sky was a clear, pale gray, the kind of light that sticks around after sunset longer than you'd expect. I remember the smell of wet leaves and asphalt as I got in my car, windows down, music low, just driving with no real direction. I ended up in Arlington without planning to. The back roads around the Trinity River have always had this strange pull for me. They wind through patches of woods that feel older than the surrounding sprawl, as if the strip malls and apartments never really managed to swallow them. That's when I passed the faded green sign Old Alton Bridge. Locals don't really call it that, everyone knows it as Goatman's Bridge. Now, if you've lived in this area long enough, you hear the stories. High school kids daring each other to cross it at night. Strange lights in the trees. A half-man, half-goat thing that supposedly shows up if you call it out. I'd laughed it off a dozen times. My cousin used to tell me you had to stand in the middle of the bridge at midnight and yell "Goatman" 3 times like some backwoods Bloody Mary. I wasn't planning to do that. I just wanted to see it, finally, in person. The road narrows as you approach. Trees crowd both sides, branches heavy with the weight of that lingering rain, dripping occasionally in a way that sounds almost like footsteps if you're alone. My tires crackled over gravel until the pavement gave way to dirt. Ahead, the bridge came into view. Rusted iron trusses rose like ribs against the dim sky. The wood planks looked slick, darkened with age and rain. No cars, no people, just me and the sound of cicadas. I parked a little ways back and killed the engine. The quiet hit me harder than I expected. You don't realize how much background noise there is until you're in a place like that. No traffic, no chatter, just wind in the leaves and the occasional splash of something moving in the creek below. The air smelled sharper there, like wet earth and old metal. I told myself I'd walk halfway across, take a picture for proof, then head back. No big deal. The wood creaked under my boots with each step, groaning as though the bridge itself wanted to remind me how old it was. My flashlight beam cut across rusted bolts and graffiti, names carved and spray-painted, curses, crude drawings. Someone had scrawled "Goatman Lives" in dripping black letters across one of the support beams. I laughed under my breath. Kids. Still, I couldn't shake the way the woods seemed to press closer the farther I went. The flashlight only reached so far, leaving gaps of darkness that felt too thick to be natural. I turned it off for a second just to see. That was a mistake. The moon barely broke through the canopy, and without the beam I could almost convince myself I wasn't alone. Something about the stillness, too complete, like the world was holding its breath. I clicked the light back on and forced myself to keep walking. Halfway across, I leaned against the railing and pointed my phone out over the water. The creek reflected little bits of light like shards of glass. I snapped a photo, though it came out blurry, just streaks of darkness and shine. That's when I heard it. A splash like a rock thrown into the water. Except I hadn't thrown anything and I didn't see ripples, just a sound out of place in the silence. Probably a fish, I muttered. But I said it out loud, which I don't normally do. It felt necessary, like I had to put a voice into the emptiness to keep it from swallowing me whole. I stayed there a few minutes longer, leaning on the railing. That's when the air shifted. Not a breeze. More like the temperature dropped by 10 degrees all at once. My skin prickled. I took a slow breath and I swear it came out in a visible puff, even though it wasn't nearly cold enough for that. I turned, half expecting someone behind me. The bridge was empty, except I wasn't sure, because in that space where the beam of my flashlight faded into dark, I thought I saw movement. Not fast, just the subtle kind, like when someone steps, just out of sight and you catch the edge of their shoulder. My chest tightened. I aimed the light directly, but it showed nothing, just more iron and wood. I told myself I'd imagined it, that my eyes were playing tricks. But when I lowered the light, I realized the forest had gone quiet. The cicadas, the rustling, gone. No sound but the faint drip of water and my own breathing. That silence pressed in harder than any noise ever could. It felt expectant. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because part of me wanted to prove I wasn't scared. Maybe because of my cousin's stupid story. But standing there, gripping the railing tight enough to hurt, I whispered, "Goatman." Nothing happened. I let out a shaky laugh, more relief than humor. Then I said it again, louder, "Goatman." The sound bounced off the iron, carried across the water. Still nothing. I shook my head, muttered, "Yeah, that's what I thought," and turned back toward my car. I only made it 3 steps before I froze. From behind me, at the far end of the bridge, came the faintest scrape of wood, like something dragging a hoof or a boot across the planks. I whipped the flashlight around. Nothing. Just emptiness stretching back to the tree line. My throat was dry. I forced myself to walk, steady at first, then faster. Each step I took, I swore I heard another. Softer, keeping pace, not echoing mine, following them. By the time I reached the end, I was nearly running. My car was a dark shape ahead, the only comfort in that place. I fumbled with the handle, threw myself inside, locked the doors. For a second, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to steady my breathing. That's when the smell hit me. Through the vents, through the closed windows. It was sharp, sour, like wet animal fur left to rot. I gagged and turned the key, engine roaring to life. My headlights lit up the dirt road, and in that glow I saw it, just for a second, framed between the trees at the far end of the bridge, a shape too tall to be a man, with horns that caught the light before it melted back into the shadows. I didn't wait. Tires spun on gravel as I tore out of there, not caring about the ruts or the branches scraping the side panels. I drove until the woods gave way to streetlights, until the smell faded, until I could almost convince myself I hadn't seen anything at all. But I did. I know I did. And the worst part? A week later, when I pulled that blurry photo off my phone, I noticed something I hadn't before. In the corner, just behind the railing where I'd been leaning, there's a shape in the darkness. Tall, hunched, and watching, and I swear to God it wasn't there when I took the picture. It was the summer of 2019, late June, the kind of Texas heat that clings to your skin even after the sun goes down. My wife, my 2 kids, and I had planned a weekend camping trip to Palo Duro Canyon. If you don't know it, Palo Duro is sometimes called the Grand Canyon of Texas. It's this massive gash in the earth, layered rock stretching for miles with colors that shift from blazing red in daylight to dark, bruised purples at night. I'd camped there once in college, but this was my family's first time. We figured it would be an adventure before the kids went back to their summer activities. We arrived Friday, June 21st, right before sunset. The temperature had just dipped below 100, but it was still hovering in the high 90s. The air smelled dry, dusty, mixed with mesquite smoke from other campers grilling nearby. The cicadas screamed in the cottonwood trees that lined parts of the canyon floor. I remember checking my watch, 7:46 p.m., just as we parked at campsite 23, a spot a little more isolated than the others, tucked near some brush and with a clear view of the canyon ridge to the east. Setting up camp was uneventful. The kids, Josh, 10, and Marcy, 8, ran off to chase lizards while my wife Angela and I wrestled with the tent poles. By the time we had the fire going, the sun had bled out behind the canyon wall, leaving that strange twilight glow where you can't quite tell what's shadow and what's solid. It was beautiful, peaceful, exactly what we wanted. We roasted hot dogs, told the kids ghost stories they rolled their eyes at, and turned in around 10:30. That's when the first thing happened. I woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of gravel crunching. At first I thought it was just another camper heading back from the bathrooms, but then it hit me. We were one of the last occupied sites down that loop. Nobody had walked by us all night. The sound was deliberate. Slow steps, stopping, then another step. I sat up straining to hear, and the night was so quiet that every movement carried. "Did you hear that?" Angela whispered from beside me. I thought about saying no to spare her the worry, but the look on her face told me she already knew. "Yeah," I admitted. We held our breath. The steps seemed to circle around the tent, pausing near the flap, then shifting to the side where the kids were asleep. I nearly unzipped it right then, but some instinct told me not to. Instead, I whispered, "Maybe it's a ranger." Angela shook her head. They'd have a flashlight. And she was right. Whoever it was, there was no light, no voice, just the sound of someone slowly pacing around our tent in the pitch dark. After maybe 2 minutes, which felt like an hour, the sound stopped. I waited another 10 minutes before convincing myself it had to be an animal, maybe a deer, though the steps were too heavy, too human. Eventually, I laid back down, though my eyes stayed open until dawn. The next morning, I went out to check. The ground at Palo Duro is this reddish dirt and loose gravel. It holds prints well. But around our tent, there was nothing. Not a single footprint, not even from us coming in and out, almost like the ground had hardened overnight. I didn't tell the kids. We packed lunches and hiked the lighthouse trail, trying to shake it off. The canyon in daylight feels almost holy. The sun paints everything in stark colors. It made the night before seem silly, like a trick of half-sleep. But Angela wasn't letting it go. At one point on the trail, she pulled me aside. "Don't you think it's weird? No prints? You heard it too." I nodded but said, "Let's not scare the kids. Probably just coyotes moving through the brush." That night, Saturday, I built the fire bigger than usual, more for comfort than light. The kids fell asleep fast, worn out from the hike. Angela and I stayed up watching the flames crackle. Around midnight, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of creosote and something else, something metallic like wet iron. I remember commenting on it, but Angela didn't answer. She was staring past the firelight toward the trees. "There," she whispered. I followed her gaze, and for a moment I thought I saw it too. A figure, standing just at the edge where the firelight couldn't quite reach. Not moving, not swaying, with the wind like the branches just standing. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound calm. No response. The figure didn't flinch, didn't turn. I stood up, grabbed the flashlight, and shined it straight ahead. Nothing. Just brush and shadow. When I swung the beam back, whatever we thought we saw was gone. That night, the pacing returned. Slower this time, more deliberate, like whoever, or whatever, it was wanted us to know they were there. The sound of footsteps circled, paused, then dragged as if a heel was being pulled. Marcy stirred in her sleep, whispering something I couldn't catch. I held her hand through the fabric of the tent wall, praying she wouldn't wake up screaming. The next morning, I walked straight to the ranger station. I explained what had happened. Footsteps, possible intruder, someone watching us. The ranger, a middle-aged guy with a sunburned face, listened patiently, then shook his head. "We've had families report things like that before," he said carefully, like he'd practiced the line. "Usually it's just the sound carrying strange in the canyon. Shadows play tricks at night." "But you've heard this before," I pressed. He didn't deny it. He just said, "If you're uncomfortable, I can move you to a different site, closer to the main road." Angela wanted to pack up and leave right then. I convinced her we'd stick it out one more night. I regret that decision every single day. Sunday night was different. The canyon felt charged, like the air before a storm. The kids were restless, rolling in their sleeping bags, muttering in their dreams. Around 3 a.m., Josh sat up suddenly, eyes wide, pointing at the tent flap. "Dad, there's someone out there," he whispered. I froze. "Go back to sleep, buddy," I whispered, but he wouldn't lie back down. I gathered my nerve and unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. The fire had long since died to embers. The moon was nearly full, throwing pale light across the canyon floor. There was a man. He was standing no more than 15 feet from our tent, facing us. His clothes looked wrong, outdated, like something out of an old photograph. A wide-brimmed hat, suspenders hanging loose, pants caked in dust. His skin looked too pale, almost gray, like he hadn't seen sun in years. And his eyes. God, his eyes. They caught the moonlight but didn't reflect it like normal eyes. They looked flat, lifeless, and locked directly on me. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Angela stirred behind me, whispering, "What do you see?" I couldn't answer. The man raised one hand slowly, like he was tipping his hat, or maybe pointing. And then, in the blink of an eye, he wasn't there. I swung the flashlight wildly, scanning every direction. Nothing. The canyon floor was empty, silent, except for the rasp of my own breathing. We didn't wait for sunrise. I woke the kids, shoved everything into the car, and drove out of that canyon in the dark, gravel spitting under the tires. We didn't stop until we were back on the highway, the canyon miles behind us. A week later, back home, I did what I shouldn't have done. I Googled. Turns out there are dozens of stories like ours from Palo Duro. Families camping, seeing a man watching their tents, always described the same way. Park rangers never find footprints. Some say he was a settler who died in the canyon. Others claim he was an outlaw hanged nearby. But no one ever seems to get a clear answer. What I can tell you is this. When I close my eyes at night, I still see him, standing just at the edge of the firelight, waiting. And sometimes when the house is quiet and the kids are asleep, I swear I hear it again. The crunch of footsteps circling just outside my window. I don't know how to explain this without sounding insane, but I'll do my best to keep it as straightforward as possible. I've lived in Austin, Texas my whole life. Born and raised here, moved out for college and came back in my late 20s to settle. It's not a city you really think of as haunted, too new compared to the East Coast, too loud and modern to have secrets hiding in the shadows. But there's one hotel downtown, one that's been standing since long before the skyline changed, that has something wrong with it. I won't name it outright because I'm not looking for trouble, and I don't want people calling me out for defamation. If you've lived here a while, you probably know the place. Red brick exterior built in the 1890s has that old-world lobby with marble floors and dark wood trim. They lean hard into the historic charm in their brochures. It's the kind of place that charges more than it should just because famous musicians and politicians stayed there back in the day. I work part-time in events and hospitality. Kind of a jack-of-all-trades gig that pays bills between bigger contracts. About a year ago, I landed a temporary position helping with conference setups at that hotel. It was late July 2024, peak heat, the kind that wraps around you like wet wool even after the sun sets. I remember checking my watch, 7:42 p.m., while hauling chairs across one of their ballrooms. The AC was cranked so low my arms were covered in goosebumps, which felt unnatural when I knew it was still 95 degrees outside. That night, after we finished, the manager pulled me aside. She asked if I'd be willing to pick up a couple of housekeeping shifts to cover for someone out sick. I didn't have a reason to say no, and honestly, I needed the extra hours. The first room she assigned me to was on the 6th floor, room 624. Nothing about it stood out at first. Same brass door handles, same beige hallway carpet with those tired floral swirls that every old hotel has. But when I slid the key card and stepped inside, something felt stale. Not the usual, someone's been smoking even though it's a non-smoking room smell, and not mildew either. It was more like iron, like coins pressed against the back of your tongue. The sheets were pulled taut on the bed, corners tucked in crisp, pillows stacked neatly. But there, across the center of the white duvet, was a stain. Deep red, dark enough. It looked almost brown, like it had soaked into the fibers a long time ago. I froze in the doorway. My first thought was that someone had hurt themselves. But the room was empty and everything else was spotless. The carpet vacuumed, the bathroom shining, even the notepad on the desk untouched. Just that one horrific blotch across the bed. I stepped closer, holding my breath. When I reached out, my fingers didn't feel anything wet. In fact, the second I touched it, the stain just vanished. Not faded, not smeared, vanished like I'd brushed away chalk dust. The sheet looked perfectly white again. I pulled my hand back so fast I almost stumbled. Later, I convinced myself it had been a trick of the light. Old fabric. Maybe a shadow. I remade the bed anyway, just to give myself peace of mind, and finished the rest of the cleaning. But the next morning, when housekeeping went through the daily checklist, room 624 had another report. The sheets, again, were red. This time I wasn't the one assigned to it. I overheard one of the other housekeepers muttering in Spanish in the break room. She shook her head, crossed herself, and said, "Siempre la misma habitación." Always the same room. The third day, I started paying closer attention. I noticed that the room was never listed under a real guest's name. Every other reservation in the system had normal details: families, couples, business travelers. But 6-24 was always blocked off with a generic placeholder. Sometimes it said maintenance hold, sometimes private. Once it just said Smith. And yet every morning it had to be cleaned. One night around midnight, I was waiting for the freight elevator to bring down linens. The 6th floor hallway was silent, except for the hum of the ice machine. I don't know why I did it, but I walked to 624 and pressed my ear to the door. At first, nothing. Then faintly, a sound like fabric shifting. A slow drag, almost like someone pulling sheets off a bed. I knocked before I could stop myself. The sound stopped instantly. I bolted back to the elevator and didn't take that hallway again until morning. The thing is, no matter how many times, the sheets were replaced no matter who did it. The next day they were always red again. Sometimes a small blotch, sometimes soaked entirely, as if someone had been murdered there overnight. But every time a hand touched the fabric, the stain vanished like smoke. One afternoon, I asked the manager if the hotel had ever had incidents. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You're here to work, not to gossip." And that was the end of it. The strangest part came about 2 weeks in. I was assigned to 624 again. This time the sheets weren't just stained, the pillows were dented, the bathroom door half closed, and the desk chair angled toward the window. Someone had been there. Except when I checked the log, no one had swiped a keycard in over 3 days. I stood in that room with the afternoon sun glaring through the curtains, heartbeat drumming in my ears. I whispered, "Hello?" like an idiot. My own voice sounded too loud against the stillness. That's when I noticed something new. On the nightstand there was a guest ledger, the kind they haven't used in decades before everything went digital. The leather cover was cracked and faded, and when I opened it, the pages were filled with names written in ink. Not typed, not printed, handwritten. The most recent entry was dated August 13, 1952. Every name had a check-in time, but no checkout. When I flipped back to the first page, my stomach dropped. The very first entry was dated 1894, and the last name on the list before the pages went blank, my own, scrawled in the same faded ink, with yesterday's date. I don't remember leaving the room. I must have run. But the next thing I knew, I was outside in the heat, gulping air that tasted like asphalt and gasoline. I didn't go back inside. I didn't pick up my last paycheck. That was a year ago. Since then, I've tried to forget. But last week, a friend of mine booked a night there for a work event. He texted me his room number. He hasn't answered me since. It was August 12, 2019, just past 9 in the evening when I left El Paso, heading east on Highway 62 toward my apartment on the edge of town. The air was heavy with the desert's late summer heat, though the sun had already dipped below the horizon. Out there, with the flat scrubland stretching in all directions and the Franklin Mountains dark against the horizon, the heat lingers in the asphalt long after dusk. The sky had taken on that deep indigo blue that lasts only a short while before true night falls, and the headlights of my old Honda cut twin tunnels through the growing darkness. I wasn't in any hurry. I'd been at a coworker's barbecue, and left earlier than most, tired from the beer and the weight of small talk. The road was nearly empty, which wasn't unusual for that stretch. Locals don't linger on that highway after dark if they can avoid it. Even if you don't believe the stories, there's something about it, an odd stillness like the desert around it is holding its breath. I didn't think much about it at the time. I just wanted to get home, shower, and collapse into bed. It must have been 10 miles outside of El Paso when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a road sign or maybe a coyote standing at the shoulder. But as my headlights reached further, I made out the shape of a man. He was standing stiff and still by the guardrail, a thumb raised in the universal signal for hitching a ride. What caught me, what made me slow down without even thinking, was his uniform. He wore army fatigues, the desert camouflage kind that blend into the scrubland if you aren't looking hard. Even from the driver's seat, I could see the dust on his boots and the slight sag of his backpack. He looked like he'd been walking a long time. I pulled onto the shoulder and rolled down the passenger side window. He leaned slightly to look in. His face was pale but not sickly, just the kind of washed-out look that comes from being in the desert sun too long. His haircut was military short, though it looked grown out, and he gave me a polite nod before speaking. Headed toward El Paso? His voice was steady, quiet. Yeah, I said. Hop in. He swung open the door, slid into the seat with the kind of stiff, practiced movements that told me he really was a soldier, not some drifter who'd bought surplus gear. His backpack thudded to the floorboard between his boots. For a few minutes, neither of us said much. The hum of the engine filled the silence. I kept sneaking glances at him, taking in the details, the uniform, the way he rested his hands carefully on his knees, the faint smell of dust and something metallic clinging to him. It reminded me of blood, though faint enough that I second-guessed myself. You stationed out here? I asked finally. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. Fort Bliss, he said. Needed to get back. That's a ways, I said. You'd have been walking all night. He didn't answer, just shifted slightly in his seat, the fabric of his fatigues rasping against the upholstery. The silence pressed in again, heavy enough that I reached for the radio, only to think better of it. Something about him made me feel like filling the car with music would be disrespectful. So I kept driving, my headlights carving out the empty road. It wasn't until we passed a reflective mile marker that I noticed it. A scar. A thin, pale line that stretched across his throat, from just under his left ear to the right side of his windpipe. It was faint in the low light but unmistakable, a long, straight mark that looked too clean, too deliberate, like something left behind by a blade. I tried not to stare, but my eyes kept flicking back to it. After a while, I cleared my throat. Rough day out there? He turned his head toward me for the first time since he got in. His eyes caught the light from the dashboard, and I swear they looked clouded, like there was a haze over them. Not blind, but distant, detached. He studied me for a moment, long, enough that my grip tightened on the wheel. You could say that, he said finally, his tone flat. That was all. No explanation, no detail, just those 4 words. I nodded, pretending that answer was enough. My mouth felt dry. I couldn't shake the thought of that scar, the way it stood out against his skin. I told myself it was from some training accident, or maybe a fight overseas, something survivable, something explainable. But the longer I drove with him sitting beside me, the harder it was to keep those rational thoughts steady. A few miles later, I glanced at the passenger seat again. It was empty. The backpack was gone. The seatbelt lay slack against the door. The faint metallic smell had vanished. I swore aloud, hitting the brakes so hard that the tires squealed. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled onto the shoulder, staring at the space where he had been. The car was silent, save for the tick of the cooling engine. There was no sign of him outside either, not in the rear view, not in the ditch, not anywhere. For a long moment I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to process. My first instinct was that I'd fallen asleep at the wheel, maybe imagined the whole thing. But the passenger side door lock was still raised like it had been when he got in. My seatbelt chime had gone off briefly when he opened the door. I hadn't imagined that. I drove the rest of the way home in silence, every nerve on edge, my eyes darting to the empty seat beside me as if he might reappear at any second. The next morning, I told myself it had been exhaustion and too many beers at the barbecue. A hallucination, a trick of the desert night. I almost convinced myself of that until I mentioned it at work. A coworker, a woman named Angela who grew up in El Paso, froze as soon as I described the uniform, the scar. You saw him too, she said softly. I frowned. What do you mean, too? She leaned closer, lowering her voice. People Have been seeing him out on 62 for years, always the same. Soldier in uniform, thumb out, pale as dust. Gets in your car, doesn't say much, then vanishes before you reach the base. My uncle picked him up once back in the 90s. Same scar across the throat. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. You're serious? Angela nodded. Some say he was killed in a wreck out there, never made it back to Bliss. Others say it wasn't a wreck at all, that somebody slit his throat and left him in the desert. Doesn't matter which. He still hasn't found his way home. She said it so matter-of-factly, like she'd recited the story before. And maybe she had. El Paso has no shortage of ghost tales. But there was something about the way she looked at me, the weight in her voice, that made me believe her. That night, when I drove home again, I kept my eyes fixed on the road, my hands locked on the wheel. I told myself I wouldn't look at the shoulder, wouldn't risk seeing him again. But somewhere around the same stretch of highway, I felt it, the sudden shift in the air inside the car, a faint smell of dust and metal, and in the reflection of the windshield just faintly, I thought I saw another shape beside me. I didn't dare turn my head. I've taken that route every week since. Some nights the seat stays empty. Other nights I catch the smell, or the impression of a figure where there shouldn't be one. I've stopped telling people. They either laugh or go quiet, and neither makes me feel any better. If you ever drive east of El Paso after dark and you see a soldier on the shoulder with a scar across his throat, don't stop. No matter how real he looks, no matter how much he needs, the ride. Because once you let him in, you don't know if he'll get out, and I still don't know if one of these nights he'll stay. I want to start by saying I'm not someone who buys into ghost stories. I work in IT. I'm used to troubleshooting problems with logic, cause, and effect. If a screen flickers, there's a voltage issue. If a program lags, you check CPU load. I like things that can be measured, tracked, and explained. But something happened to me in the fall of 2019 that I still can't reconcile, and every time I've tried to dismiss it, there's always that one detail, so small but so undeniable, that keeps me awake. It was October 12th, a Saturday. I remember because it was the weekend after my 33rd birthday, and my sister had been nagging me to visit her in Longview, Texas. She'd just had her second kid, and I figured it was time to be the good uncle again. The drive from Dallas to Longview isn't bad, 3 hours if you avoid traffic, and the weather that weekend was cool for Texas. Mid-60s during the day, high 40s at night, the kind of air that smells clean, like it's just been rinsed through pine needles. I left around noon, stopped at a gas station outside Tyler, and rolled the windows down once the 2-lane highways cut deeper into East Texas. If you've ever driven those roads, you know the scenery. Thick walls of pine on either side, long stretches without houses, the occasional mailbox that looks abandoned. It's beautiful, but also empty. About 20 minutes from Longview, I passed a small Greene County sign, Cemetery Road. No numbers, no arrows, just that. Normally I wouldn't have paid attention, but the timing was weird. My sister had texted me just 10 minutes earlier, saying she needed another hour before I came over because the baby had thrown up everywhere. I wasn't eager to sit in a house that smelled like formula and Lysol, so I figured I'd kill time. Curiosity won. I turned down Cemetery Road. The asphalt was cracked, patched with gravel, but it led surprisingly straight through the woods. No houses, no parked trucks, no rusting tractors like you usually see in rural Texas. Just forest, thick enough to block most of the sun. My radio lost reception within a minute. Half a mile in, the road ended at a rusted cattle gate that had been dragged halfway open. Behind it was a clearing, and in that clearing, a graveyard. I almost didn't get out of the car. It didn't look like a public cemetery, more like one of those family plots ranchers keep on their land. The grass was uneven, tall in some spots, bare in others, and the stones were scattered, not lined up neatly. What struck me most was how small everything looked. No grand markers, no angel statues, just squat, pale stones, all of them the same size. I parked on the side and stepped out. The air had a stillness to it, no wind, no birds, just the crunch of my shoes on gravel. The first stone I walked to was blank. Not blank from erosion, but polished smooth like it had never been carved. So was the next, and the next. I crouched down, ran my hand over one of them. Cold granite, rough edges, but no letters. Just a stone without a name. That's when I noticed something odd. In the right light, when the sun shifted through the trees, you could almost see faint lines like the ghost of an inscription. But the moment you blinked, they were gone. I leaned closer, squinting, and for a fraction of a second, I swear I saw the word Hollis. The letters weren't carved exactly. They looked more like shadows resting on the surface. I jerked back, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the stone was blank. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Maybe mineral streaks in the granite, maybe moss stains. But as I moved through the rows, it kept happening. Names, sometimes whole, sometimes broken, flickered. On the stones, Catherine, M. Sir Caldwell. Infant. Never for more than a second. Always just enough for my brain to register before vanishing. The deeper I walked, the heavier the air felt. It wasn't hot. If anything, it was cooler than the road, but there was a pressure in my ears like I'd descended in altitude. My breathing sounded too loud. And then I heard it. A voice. Not a clear voice, not words exactly, but the low murmur you hear when someone is speaking across a room with their back turned. It seemed to rise from the stones themselves, a current of overlapping whispers. I froze, scanning the clearing. Nobody was there. No cars, no footsteps, just me. The whispers faded when I stepped back, came stronger when I leaned in. Okay, I muttered, half to break the silence, half to remind myself I was still me. Old stones, trick of the wind, sound carries. But then one of the whispers rose above the others. It wasn't a sentence, it wasn't even a word. It was my name, Daniel. Clear as day, not shouted, not groaned, spoken, like someone was standing right behind me. I spun so fast I nearly tripped. Nothing. Just rows of faceless stones and the pine wall behind them. That was enough. My chest went tight, my skin prickled. I bolted, back to the car, slammed the door, and twisted the ignition so hard the key scraped my knuckles. The engine started, but the radio, which had been dead earlier, flared on with static. In the hiss, just under the white noise, a voice murmured, "Don't read them." I killed the radio, threw the car in reverse, and didn't breathe easy until Cemetery Road spat me back onto the highway. By the time I reached my sister's house, the sun was setting. I told myself it was just an old cemetery. Maybe locals had legends about it. Maybe I'd psychologized myself into hearing things. I didn't say a word to my sister. What was I going to tell her? "Hey, congrats on the baby. Also your county," Graveyard whispered my name. But that night, lying on her guest couch, I dreamed of the stones. In the dream, the names weren't flickering anymore. They were burning. Every marker glowed with red-hot letters, and when I walked past, each one hissed my name in unison. The heat was unbearable, the air choked with smoke, and just before I woke, I saw one stone at the very end of the row. It had my full name, my birth date, and the death date was blank, waiting. I woke drenched in sweat. I left Longview before sunrise. Didn't even tell my sister goodbye, just texted an excuse about needing to beat traffic. I drove the whole way back to Dallas without the radio on. That should have been the end. Except 3 weeks later on Halloween night, I was walking back from my friend's apartment after handing out candy to his kids. The air was sharp, the neighborhood quiet. I passed a construction site where an old church had been torn down. Through the chain-link fence, I saw a stack of broken stones, and on the top one, I swear, no tricks of the light this time, I saw my name. I know how this sounds. Sleep deprivation, stress, overactive imagination. Maybe all three. But I can't shake the feeling that I did something wrong by stepping into that place. And I keep wondering, if those stones really were blank, then why did the voice on my radio say, "Don't read them"? Because now every time I close my eyes, I do. And the names don't go away. I moved into the farmhouse on August 12, 2019. It was a Monday, hot and muggy, the kind of Houston summer day where the air feels heavy enough to chew. My uncle left me the place when he passed, though nobody in the family seemed too eager to claim it. I remember the way my mother wrinkled her nose when she told me about the inheritance. "It's out past the bayou near Barker Reservoir," she said, her voice lowering a little like it was a shameful thing. That old place shouldn't even still be standing. I didn't care. I was 27, stuck in a dead-end job, at an auto shop, barely scraping together enough to rent a one-bedroom apartment in a part of town where gunshots were just background noise. Free property, no matter how decrepit, was a miracle. The first time I drove up to the house, I almost missed it. The gravel road narrowed into a dirt trail choked with weeds, branches scraping the side of my truck like fingernails. Then, just past a bend, the trees opened and there it was. 2 stories tall with peeling white paint, a wraparound porch that sagged in the middle, and windows that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. The field around it was flat, broken by tufts of dead grass, and the whole place smelled faintly of stagnant water. I noticed something strange when I parked. The front steps tilted slightly to the right like the ground beneath was shifting. Inside, the floors creaked with every step, though not in the way old houses normally do. This creaking sounded like something deep below was straining against the weight above it. That first night, I couldn't sleep. It wasn't fear, at least not yet, but the silence. Houston nights were always filled with noise. Traffic, dogs barking, the occasional train in the distance. Out here, there was nothing but cicadas, and when they stopped, it was like the world had been muted. At exactly 3:07 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I thought it was a text, but when I picked it up, the screen was blank. The digital clock I'd set on the dresser had frozen too, glowing red numbers stuck on 3:07. A few seconds later, everything flickered back to life, but the time jumped ahead by 6 minutes. The next morning, I laughed it off as a power surge, though I couldn't explain why my phone had been affected. 2 weeks later, I started keeping track of something else. The back door scraped against the frame when I opened it, and each time it felt lower, like the whole house was sinking a little deeper. I measured the porch railing against my truck bed. It had dropped maybe half an inch in a month. At first I thought it was my imagination, but when I asked an old guy at the feed store about it, he shook his head. "Ground out there's swampy," he said. "Always has been. Some houses sink. That one in particular, though." He stopped, mid-sentence, then busied himself with the register. I pressed him. "That one what?" He wouldn't look at me. "Best not to stay there long, folks around here know." That night I noticed something new. I'd left an analog wristwatch on the kitchen counter, one of those old Timex pieces my uncle had collected. At breakfast, I saw the second hand, twitching back and forth between ticks, refusing to move past the 12. The time? 3:07. The days started blending together after that. Every clock, whether digital, battery-powered, or mechanical, would stop dead at 3:07 a.m., sometimes for a minute, sometimes longer. I tried staying awake to catch it, but whenever the time came, my mind felt foggy, like I was being pulled underwater. One night, I managed to fight it. I sat on the couch with every light in the house on, chugging coffee until my stomach churned. At 3:06, I heard the cicadas outside stop. The refrigerator hum cut out. Even the wind against the shutters died. The second hand on my watch ticked once, then froze. The floor groaned beneath me, deep and drawn out like something massive shifting below the earth. I felt a tremor ripple through the house. Not enough to knock anything over, but enough to rattle the glass panes in the windows. Then came the sound. Not footsteps exactly. More like a dragging, a slow shift of weight across the soil beneath the house. It started beneath the kitchen, scraped toward the living room, then paused directly under where I sat. I held my breath, gripping the arm of the couch so tightly my knuckles went white. The air grew heavy. The smell of damp earth filled my nose, sharp and sour, like a freshly dug grave. My eyes watered, my chest tightened. I wanted to move, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. When the second hand finally ticked forward again, Everything snapped back to life. The fridge buzzed, the cicadas screamed, and I gasped like I'd been holding my breath for hours. The watch read 3:08. I told myself it was sleep deprivation, stress, maybe carbon monoxide. I even bought detectors for every room, but they never went off. By October, the sinking had become undeniable. The porch tilted at a slant, the kitchen floor dipped in the middle, and water pooled in the crawl space whenever it rained. My friends stopped visiting after the second time their phones glitched at 3:07. "Dude, seriously," my buddy Marco said one night, after his car alarm went off at exactly that time while parked in my driveway. "You need to get out of here. Sell it. Burn it, I don't care. That place isn't right." I wanted to believe him, but something about the house had its hooks in me. I couldn't leave. Not yet. The final straw came in January 2020. It was a rare cold night. Temperatures dipping into the 30s, frost forming on the windows. I woke to a thud from the basement, or what passed for one, a damp storage space half dug into the ground. I grabbed a flashlight and went down. The air was freezing, my breath visible in the beam. The dirt floor was uneven, sinking deeper toward the center. That's when I saw it. A hole maybe 3 feet wide had opened in the earth. The soil around it was damp, like something had pushed upward before collapsing. I crouched closer, shining the light inside. The beam caught on something, pale, smooth and round about 5 feet down. For a moment I thought it was stone. Then I saw the teeth. Not a full skull, just the top half jutting from the dirt, jawless and cracked with age. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. The screen glowed with a time I already knew. 3:07. The dragging sound rose. Beneath me, louder this time, like something clawing its way toward the surface. The ground vibrated. Dirt trickled into the hole, covering the skull until nothing remained. I ran upstairs, locked every door, and sat with my back against the wall until sunrise. I called the county office the next day, tried to get someone out to inspect the foundation. The woman on the phone paused when I gave the address. "Sir," she said carefully, "we don't service that property anymore." I asked why. She hung up. That was 4 years ago. The house has sunk nearly a foot since then. Doors won't close, windows are crooked, and I sleep in a corner where the floor feels least tilted. Every night at 3:07 a.m., the clocks stop. The dragging comes. Sometimes it's beneath the house. Sometimes it's under my bed. I know I should leave. I've packed more than once. But each time I reach the front door, something shifts in the ground. A groan deep below and I freeze. My chest tightens, my skin prickles, and I hear the soil moving like it's alive. I think the house doesn't want me to go. Or maybe whatever is beneath it doesn't. The farmhouse is still sinking, and I'm sinking with it. It was the evening of October 14th, 2019, a Monday, a little after 7:30 p.m. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the West Texas sky washed in that heavy purple blue that always seemed to linger too long on clear nights. I had been driving east along I-10 for nearly 6 hours straight, making the long, tedious trek back toward San Antonio after visiting my uncle in El Paso. The air was cool enough that I kept the window cracked, letting the dry wind whip in, carrying with it the faint smell of dust and sun-baked asphalt. Traffic had thinned almost completely. Every few minutes a semi would roar past in the opposite direction, its headlights slicing through the darkness. But otherwise it was just me, the endless stretch of desert highway, and that low, constant hum of my tires against the concrete. I wasn't in a rush. I had a thermos of coffee half gone, the radio playing quietly, and the comforting thought that I could always pull into one of the roadside rest stops if fatigue got the better of me. My phone had lost reception about an hour back. I didn't think much of it. That part of the desert always swallowed cell service whole. You learn to accept it. Around 8:15, I spotted something up ahead on the right shoulder of the highway. A glint of orange in the headlights, something upright. As I drew closer, I realized it was one of those old emergency call boxes. You don't see them much anymore. Most were dismantled years ago, once cell phones made them obsolete. This one looked like it had been forgotten, a rusted metal post, standing stubbornly in the dark, its reflective paint dulled and flaking. The box itself was hanging crooked on the pole, door ajar like someone had forced it open years ago and nobody cared to fix it. I remember thinking it looked almost eerie, standing there alone, lit for just a second by my beams before being swallowed again by the night. I drove on, shaking the image off. But about half a mile later, I noticed something strange. A flicker of pale light in my rearview mirror. I slowed down a little, peering back, and sure enough, faint but undeniable, the call box was glowing. Not the reflective strip, but the box itself, like something inside was lit up. A steady, unnatural light that didn't belong there. I nearly pressed the brakes, but some instinct told me not to. I kept going, convincing myself it was just my imagination. Maybe the glass caught the headlights of another car. Maybe my brain was playing tricks after so many hours staring into the dark. But when I glanced back again, the desert behind me was empty. No headlights, no cars, just black. I shook it off, turned up the radio, and focused on the road. About 20 minutes later, my fuel light blinked on. I cursed under my breath. I had passed a station maybe 40 miles back, and I couldn't remember how long until the next one. I scanned for an exit sign, but the highway stretched on, barren. I knew I'd need to conserve what was left, so when I saw a rest area sign, one of those with picnic tables and bathrooms, I pulled in. The lot was empty except for a single pickup parked under a lamp, its hood up, no one around. The yellow lights buzzed faintly, drawing swarms of moths that battered themselves senseless against the glass. I parked farther down, killed the engine, and stepped out. The desert night air was cool and unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your ears until you start to imagine faint sounds that aren't there. Gravel crunched under my boots as I stretched my legs. I debated whether I should approach the pickup, maybe see if the driver needed help, but something about it felt wrong. The hood was up, but the truck looked abandoned. No light inside, no movement, no sign of life. I decided against it and headed toward the restroom building instead. That's when I heard it. A faint metallic ring, like the hollow clink of something striking steel. It came from the highway. I froze, listening. The sound came again, soft, deliberate, like someone lifting the receiver of a payphone and letting it drop. I turned my head toward the entrance, ramp, and my stomach sank. At the edge of the lamp glow, standing just beyond in the dark, was another emergency call box, the same kind I had passed before. Same orange post, same crooked door. But there hadn't been one here when I pulled in. I was sure of it. I would have seen it. I stood rooted, staring, until the metallic ring echoed again, faint but distinct, like the sound was traveling too far to be real. Against my better judgment, I took a few steps toward it, eyes locked on that box. It didn't glow this time. It just stood there silent and broken. But as I stared, I swear I heard something else carried low on the desert wind, a voice high and breathy, almost a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound prickled the back of my neck. My heart started pounding. I turned back to my car, telling myself I was overtired, dehydrated, whatever excuse I could grab. As I reached for the door handle, my phone, despite having been dead to service for hours, buzzed in my pocket. A text notification. I pulled it out and my hand went cold. No number, no contact name, just the words, "Answer it." Before I could react, the metallic ring came again, louder this time, impossibly close, like it was coming from inside the rest area itself. I spun around. The call box was gone. Not a trace. Just the empty lot, the humming lamps, the silent truck under its hood. I didn't wait. I jumped back into my car, turned the key, and floored it back onto the highway, tires spitting gravel. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel steady. The radio hissed with static for a few minutes before cutting back to music, but I kept it low, listening, half expecting to hear that ring again underneath the noise. For the rest of the drive, every reflective road sign I passed made my heart lurch. I kept thinking I saw the crooked shape of another box standing in the dark, waiting. When I finally reached a gas station an hour later, I pulled in and sat there under the bright lights for nearly 10 minutes before I could calm down enough to fill the tank. The station attendant gave me a funny look when I asked how long ago they'd taken down the old highway call boxes. He said he couldn't remember them ever being here at all, not in the years he'd been working. I told myself it was exhaustion. Maybe I dozed for a second at the wheel, dreamed the whole thing. But 2 nights later, when I got home and plugged my phone in, I found a new voicemail waiting. No number attached. Just 13 seconds of silence, and then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a child whispering my name. I deleted it instantly, but even now, every time I drive west on I-10, I can't stop myself from glancing at the shoulder, half expecting to see that rusted box waiting again in the dark. And sometimes, I think I hear the faint metallic ring underneath the hum of the engine, like a call I'm afraid to answer but know one day I might have to. I have to start this by saying I'm not the kind of guy who scares easy. I grew up in Texas, where the nights stretch for miles and the silence can feel heavier than any sound. I've driven through dust storms, gotten stuck in flash floods, even had a rattlesnake crawl out from under my truck once. You learn to roll with strange things out here. But what happened on I-10 3 years ago is something I still can't roll past. It has dug its claws so deep into me that I can barely close my eyes at night without hearing it. It was October of 2020, one of those sticky Texas nights where the heat doesn't let go even after the sun has gone down. I'd been visiting family in San Antonio and left late, around 11 p.m., planning to drive west to Junction before finding a motel. The traffic was gone by the time I hit the outskirts, and the highway stretched in a straight black line, unbroken and empty. I remember fiddling with the radio, static popping through the speakers, until I gave up and let the silence have its way. The only sound left was the low drone of my tires and the occasional rattle in the dashboard. Out there, past midnight, you realize just how big Texas really is. It feels like you're the only person left in the world. That's when I saw. At about 20 yards ahead, just off the shoulder, stood a call box. You might not remember them if you're younger. They used to be everywhere. Metal boxes planted along the interstate so stranded drivers could phone for help. The state started pulling them out years ago when cell service spread. Most of the ones I'd seen were battered, rusted, leaning, sideways. But this one looked new. Shiny coat of blue paint. Sticker reflecting my headlights like it had just been applied. And it was ringing. I almost laughed because at first I thought I was hearing things. That faint jingle didn't belong out here in the desert. I rolled the window down a crack and the sound became unmistakable. A phone, ringing steady and mechanical. I passed it by, my chest tightening. Curiosity gnawed at me, but I told myself not to stop. Nothing good happens on Texas highways after midnight. I drove maybe another mile before the guilt set in. What if someone was stranded? What if that phone was somehow still connected and someone desperately needed help? I slowed, checked the mirror. The box was still there, glowing faintly in the headlights. Against every bit of common sense, I threw the truck into reverse and backed slowly down the shoulder. The call box loomed into view, humming faintly. Its receiver swung gently on its cord. The ringing hadn't stopped. I sat there for a moment staring. My palms were slick on the wheel. Finally, with my heart pounding, I climbed out. The night air hit me hot and dry, carrying the dusty smell of cedar. Crickets chirped, a lonely chorus filling the void. The phone was still ringing. I lifted the receiver. "Hello?" I said, my voice tighter than I wanted. At first, all I heard was static. I pulled the receiver closer, pressing it against my ear. The static thinned and then, faintly like a whisper carried from far away, I heard a child's voice. "Hello?" I froze. It was a young voice, maybe a little boy's, though it was hard to tell through the static. Hey there," I said, my throat dry. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Silence. Then, "You shouldn't stop." The words were soft, clipped, spoken with a certainty that didn't belong to a child. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. "What do you mean?" Static flared. Then the voice came clearer, sharper, as if right beside me. "He's behind you." The receiver slipped from my hands and swung against the metal box with a clang. I spun around so hard my vision blurred. The highway was empty. Nothing but blacktop stretching into endless dark. No headlights, no cars, not a soul in sight. My pulse thundered in my ears. I grabbed the dangling receiver again, but the phone was silent now. Not even static, just dead air. When I turned back, the box was different. The door hung half open, paint peeled and rusted, the receiver cord snapped. There was no ringing, no hum, nothing but a lifeless husk standing crooked in the dirt. I stumbled back into my truck, slammed the locks, and tore down the highway like the devil was on my bumper. For a while, I convinced myself I'd hallucinated. The whole thing. Lack of sleep, too much caffeine, a trick of the mind. But 2 nights later, when I finally thought I was safe in my own home, my cell phone rang at 3:14 in the morning. The caller ID read, "Highway Call Box." My stomach dropped. My hand shook as I answered. Static poured into my ear, the same sharp hiss as before. Then the child's voice, faint but clear, whispering my name. I nearly threw the phone across the room. It hasn't stopped since. Every few months, usually late at night, I'll get a call. Sometimes it's just static. Sometimes it's that same warning, "Don't stop." Once I swear I heard breathing, slow, heavy, right against the receiver. And twice now I've heard something worse. The last time, just a week ago, I picked up out of some sick compulsion. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a voice that wasn't a child's, wasn't human in any way I can describe, spoke 3 words I'll never forget. "I found you." The line went dead. Now when I drive I-10, even in daylight, I can't help but glance at the shoulders. And sometimes, just for a split second, I think I see one of those blue boxes, standing straight and new, waiting for me to notice. And I know that if I ever stop again, I won't be the one telling this story. I don't talk about this much anymore, not since the night it happened, but I've been seeing more posts online about strange things on Texas highways, and I figure maybe it's time to tell my story. It's about a truck, a blue pickup, the kind of common old Chevy you see in every town out here. Except this one wasn't normal, and I don't think it was driven by anyone who belonged to this world. It was June of 2021, and I was driving from Dallas to Odessa for work. My company had sent me out to check on a pipeline project, and I left way too late in the day. By the time I hit the stretch past Abilene, the sun had gone down. The highways out there are long, straight, and empty, just ribbons of asphalt cutting across fields of mesquite and scrub. I had the windows down, radio low, trying to keep myself awake. The air was warm, carrying that dry, grassy smell that never quite goes away in West Texas. There weren't many cars out, just the occasional pair of headlights in the distance, most heading the other way. I was almost relaxed, settling into that hypnotic rhythm of night driving when I noticed the glow behind me. Headlights maybe half a mile back. At first I didn't think much of it, but they were gaining fast. Too fast. Within a minute the vehicle was right up on me, so close the lights filled my rear view and blinded me. I tapped the brakes, hoping whoever it was would back off, but they didn't. They were tailgating me. Squinted into the mirror and caught a glimpse of the truck. It was an old blue Chevy, paint dull, grille dented, the kind you see rusting in yards or barreling down back roads. But something about it felt wrong. The cab looked too dark, the windshield pitch black as if it were painted over. I flipped my blinker and pulled into the right lane to let them pass, but the truck didn't pass. It slowed when I slowed, sped up when I did. Always in my rear view, never falling back. My knuckles whitened around the wheel. The empty road stretched on forever, and I couldn't see another set of headlights in either direction. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was some drunk local messing with me. Still, a knot of dread tightened in my stomach as the minutes dragged. Finally, desperate to get away, I hit the gas and pushed the speedometer past 80. My truck rattled, tires humming, but the Blue pickup kept up effortlessly, glued to my bumper. Then, all at once, its headlights cut out. 1 second, the road behind me was blinding white. The next, nothing but darkness. My chest seized. I checked the mirror again and again, but the truck was gone. No taillights, no shadow, nothing. I should have been relieved, but a cold dread seeped through me. Roads out there don't have turnoffs every mile. There was nowhere for that truck to go. I drove another 20 minutes, pulse still hammering, before I started to calm down. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe fatigue had played tricks on me. Then I saw it again. Up ahead this time, parked. On the shoulder. The same blue Chevy. It sat angled toward the road, headlights off, as if waiting. My heart leapt into my throat. I eased into the left lane, gripping the wheel so tight my hands ached. As I drew closer, I tried to look, tried to see who was inside, but there was no one. The cab was empty. I swear to you, I saw the steering wheel turning on its own, the shadowy outline of hands gripping nothing. I floored it, not daring to glance, back until the glow of Odessa's lights finally rose on the horizon. When I got to my hotel, I sat in the parking lot for nearly an hour, shaking too hard to move. That should have been the end of it. A nightmare of the road. Something I could file away and forget. But 2 weeks later, when I was back home in Dallas, I found something on my truck. A streak of blue paint along the rear bumper. I live alone. My truck was parked in my driveway, far from the road. No one had borrowed it. And sometimes, late at night, when I check the mirror while driving home, I swear I see headlights riding too close, filling the glass. They always vanish before I can be sure. I don't drive to Odessa anymore. But the paint on my bumper never fades, no matter how many times I scrub it.